Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Rinnegan Naruto hates his family and leaves Konoha part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. There were days Naruto would forget himself. He would sit in his iron, steel-reinforced cage, staring at nothing but remembering when life was better and more innocent. Days were brighter, people were kinder, and life was easy. Once upon a time he had a sister. A twin sister. She was the most beautiful girl he had ever seen, and in his line of experience he had seen his own fair share of girls and women walk in and torture him with metal instruments of death. She was the most precious person in his whole life, and she had sworn to always be with him, and he with her, because they shared the same soul, they thought the same thoughts, they knew each other so well and so deeply that they might as well be the same person. They killed her in front of his eyes as he struggled to save her, and for what? So he would become a better pawn. Naruto was his everything, and they had killed her, slit her throat, and laid her body in his cell so he could cry over her. Hug her cold body to his own like his life depended on it. Before she was taken away by Kabuto, and he never saw what they did to her body, but he could guess they threw her away like a bag of dog shit. When the twins had been handed over by their father to Orochimaru to be experimented on, Naruto only had Naruto to stop him from biting his tongue and bleeding out. He lived for her, as she did for him. They were each other's strength, even as the experiments got crueler and they slowly started to lose their humanity. His father, Minato. Konoha. Fire Country. The whole world would pay for taking his sister away from him. Orochimaru slinked through the many cages in his base in Grass Country, a sick smile etched on his face as those inside the cages shrank away from him in terror, clenching their eyes shut and praying to whatever god they still believed in to save them. He tooted, a low hissing sound that drove them closer to the bars at the back of their cages. If they still believed in being saved, then they still needed to be conditioned to lose that hope. Gladly for him, and sadly for them, he still had more than enough tests to break their will. The snake Sannin walked to the very end of the prison room of his base and stopped at the smallest cage there. Inside it was his most prized test subject. Naruto. He had no surname, seeing as his father disowned him as he was handed over. For the good of Konoha, they said. He was the holder of Kyuubi's chakra, while his dead sister held the great beast's soul. Minato personally made sure the seals were securely in place and added a fail-safe seal to kill Naruto if so much as a sliver of Kyuubi chakra escaped. Orochimaru checked, and so did Jiraiya and Hiruzen. The snake man didn't know why the Yondaime chose to keep the youngest Namake's child and hand over the twins, but quite frankly he was too happy to care. His job was to break Naruto's will and make him a loyal, mindless servant to Konoha. Danzo would have done this much faster, but they had entrusted Orochimaru because he was the twins' godfather. It was his obligation to raise them to be loyal to Konoha. The cage the boy was kept in was about 2 adult shoulder lengths wide and about as tall as the Sannin, but for the painfully unhealthy child the space was more than enough. Though, as he squatted down to Naruto's height and smiled widely into the cage at the boy, Naruto didn't move away in fear as usual, or even shiver. He just stayed on his knees, his hands on the ground and his head lowered, making his dirty red hair cover his eyes. Orochimaru could hear the boy breathe in quietly and release it just as low, a continuous process until he coughed for Naruto attention, but got no reaction. The man found it strange that he hadn't been able to look the child in the eyes after his sister had been murdered. Either the hair would block them or painfully clenched eyelids would. Seeing his eyes as he tortured the child didn't really matter to him, so he chose to ignore it. This was how it has been since he had murdered Naruto a week ago. The 9-year-old boy lost all sense of emotion and feeling, rather letting the world move around him while he stood and allowed whatever happened to him happen. Brutal experiments didn't make him scream anymore. Being beaten to a bloody pulp by his ninjas didn't faze Naruto anymore. Hell, even being threatened by his most intimidating interrogation expert didn't make the boy quake with fear anymore. Orochimaru was almost tempted to think that he had finally broken Naruto, after 6 long years of trying, but at the same time he didn't. He chose Naruto over his sister for one reason and one reason only. Naruto had the great beast chakra. There was no use for the soul whatsoever, even if the holder of said soul was a magnificent human specimen. He heard a faint rustling sound from the cage and he saw the oversized, brown with dirt shirt Naruto wore crinkle slightly, though the boy still hadn't moved. The Sannin smile wavered and fell altogether when he saw the chain connected to the boy's collar, all the way to the back of the cage, sway from side to side before it stopped, then vibrated, making a clinking sound as it moved. The mad Sannin chalked it up to a slight draft coming from the lone, tiny window a few feet on the wall behind Naruto. "How are you today, my godson?" he asked in a sinister hiss and frowned sharply when he got no reply. "What have I told you about not replying when I speak to you?" Naruto's breathing didn't waver and his body didn't shake, even as Orochimaru poured all of his killer intent onto the small child. For your insolence I will have Kimimaro and Kabuto teach you some manners. The man sniffed and was about to stand up when Naruto whispered under his breath. What was that? Speak up, child. I said, Naruto said in a raspy voice, not caring that the last time he drank water was 3 days ago, and it was the mucky brown water his face had been slammed into during a beating from Kimimaro. Do you love me, godfather? Orochimaru smiled. I love you much more than anyone would give me credit for, my child. Then why? Why what? There were a lot of things Naruto meant by why. Naruto's clothes rustled again after a slow exhale. Why did you take my sister away from me? She was the hurdle you needed to pass before you can truly reach your potential. If I hadn't killed her, then you wouldn't have been able to lift all those weights, or move very fast. The boy had shown them that he was able to lift an outstanding amount of weights, merely a day after his sister was killed. Any more questions? Yes, Naruto muttered, his voice sounding like a quiet hiss as he drew out the word. Do you think I'm ready to destroy the world? The man chuckled in amusement and closed his eyes. Oh child, you have some crazy dreams. I'm going to be frank with you, my godson. His face moved to the cell bars and he clasped two in his hands as he grinned evilly at the child he loved. You will never be free long enough to even think that. I see, the boy said. Suddenly the chains began spasming erratically and the boy still hadn't moved as his clothes rustled loudly, drawing the attention of the other slaves. Universal pull. Orochimaru's head slammed into the bar, forehead cracking at the sturdiness of the CO-reinforced bars. Naruto muttered the Rinnegan Jutsu again, in an eerily calm voice, and the snake man's bashed his head again, and again, more than 7 times, each one more bone-chilling than the last and cracking open his tormentor's head mercilessly, until the 8th time packed in enough strength to slip it through the bars. Even as Naruto stopped saying the words after the second try, his mind and his eyes still allowed him to use it without stop. Naruto's right hand lifted up and he placed his hand on the head of the dazed Sannin. Soul Eater. He pulled his hand back and as he did so a wispy white smoke flowed from the head of the struggling snake man. As the very last bits of it came out, Orochimaru stopped moving abruptly. Naruto looked at the palm of his hands where he held the soul of his godfather, his head still lowered enough to hide his eyes, before he squeezed tightly and the soul disintegrated into nothing. Naruto rose onto his feet in one smooth motion, quick enough to startle the others in their cells, and the bars of his cage creaked aside, making Orochimaru's dead body slump backwards and allowing him to step over it and move outside. The boy stood still after this, his hidden eyes on the cooling body of his tormentor, before he looked up and every other slave beheld the almighty eyes of the outcast. The Rinnegan. It was black with red concentric circles winding out from the small dot-like pupil. The eyes of a god. It drew their attention and they nervously shuffled closer to him, barred from reaching him by their cages, but that didn't stop them from hesitantly reaching out to touch him, still all to no avail. Naruto could hear the alarms blaring as he focused repulsive force to blow apart his red restrained collar. He was still the most prized test subject in the entire village. It would be stupid not to connect his restraints to the alarm system. His eyes allowed him to sense the multiple chakra signatures pounding down the stairs and armed to the teeth, but he didn't care. He had activated his Rinnegan the night he spent the night with his sister's dead body. Never knew his eyes changed as he kept his arms tightly wrapped around her limp form until he had the deep feeling of change happening in his body. The Dijitsu mutated with his already mutated chakra, which happened after the rigorous experiments done on him, allowing his chakra to mix with the potent reserve of the nine-tailed fox, perfectly mixed together by his Rinnegan, making it black with red circles, an amped-up version of what it was supposed to be. That was why he could use gravitational forces to bash Orochimaru's head against the bars without having the usual 5-second cooldown. The boy somehow knew that his eyes were not supposed to allow him this much abilities. He was smart for his age, so he summed it all up to the changes Orochimaru had been making to his chakra network. Naruto's eyes looked at each slave holed up in their cages, yearning to merely touch his feet and pleading for him to have mercy on their souls. As he felt the ninjas nearing the containment room, he said, "Who wants to follow me?" No one replied, and Naruto was about to begin his march forward. His intentions for the village were not good, until he was stopped by many screams coming from the slaves. "I will. My lord, I will follow. Take me. Master, please. Help us. Save us. Take us with you, my lord." Naruto raised his right hand for silence, and he felt his lips twitch upwards at their complete devotion, especially after witnessing him end their oppressor with no problem at all. He was their hope. Naruto began his march forward, to the door into the containment area, and every cage he passed creaked heavily, and the bars bent apart. His gobbly eyes pulsed with each bent bar, and the slaves slid out, timidly walking behind him and growing in numbers until the underground room that was easily as large as the forest of death was full of free people, all following the one that had set them free, adoration in their eyes and fear singing songs in their heart. Naruto didn't need to turn around to gauge their loyalty, and it made him pleased that his plans for world domination, after it had been purged of all he hated, was going so well. He already had a growing base of followers that would do anything for him. These people, ranging from children as young as babies being carried by their mothers or older siblings, if they were still alive, to old men and women that hobbled in the crowd, trailing after the god with black and red eyes as he slowly led the march to the door, where he stopped and his eyes thrummed again as the iron door crinkled within itself like paper and blasted outwards, towards the swarm of ninjas flooding down the stairs. The redhead felt his heart thud when he caught sight of Kabuto standing at the front of the ninjas, after dodging the iron doors. The other few ninjas weren't so lucky. Their bloody body parts became smears on the walls and ceiling. "Get back to your cells!" Kabuto yelled and brandished 2 electric batons in his hands, clashing them together and making those behind Naruto flinch as small arcs of lightning escaped and scorched the ground around the medic. "I will not repeat myself," he said with an evil smirk that made the glint of his glasses even more menacing. The people following Naruto became silent and looked to Naruto, who remained emotionless and unafraid. Their eyes widened, as well as those of the sound ninjas, when an unseen force ripped Kabuto's arms off and had the severed limbs float in the air before the shocked medic, still grasping the crackling batons. "Do you all want justice?" Naruto said in a low voice to those behind him, and there was a collective roar of voices and Naruto nodded curtly. "So be it." His eyes flashed and Kabuto's legs ripped off his body again, making the regenerating medic scream in pain as his limbs floated before his eyes, still twitching with movement. Naruto lifted up the body of the man with his Jujutsu ability, and casually threw his stumpy body behind him like yesterday's garbage. This left the armless, legless loyal ninja to Orochimaru at the mercy of those he tormented, for once in his life and also for the very last time, as all those around him, where Naruto had dumped his body, descended on him in a flurry of fists, feet, and curses. As Naruto allowed his followers to have their fill of revenge, he lifted his hands up and motioned around, making the arms with batons and legs dance around before the terrified shinobi. He recognized most of them. Those that laughed when he mourned his sister, those that jeered as he was frequently injected with chakra poison and subsequently healed before he could die, those that poked fun at him for being a rejected son of the Yondaime. He could recognize them. The pandemonium of activity behind him continued as he reached his hands forwards abruptly, grabbing hold of all the shinobi tasked to contain him and the others, and tore out their hearts, soaking the stone ground and drenching the walls in their blood as he dragged his arms back, elbows bent as he made the action of pulling. He began the procession again, and the satisfied people continued behind him, stepping on the motionless, dead body of the silver-haired medic. There was only so much his regeneration could save him from. They tried not to get fazed by the blood and gore around them, because they wholeheartedly wanted their god to smile upon them for their devotion. It would have been harder to proceed up the stairs with all the dead, blood-soaked bodies littered around, but Naruto mentally used his control over gravity to gather them up into a ball of bleeding flesh and hovered them before him, adding more and more shinobi to it as they surged down the stairs. The new Rinnegan holder emerged from the stairwell, and held his right hand above his head with the giant ball of body parts floating above it. Naruto closed his fist and the bones of each part fractured and broke, right before the very eyes of the stunned silent sound shinobi. The boy glared at them as he whispered, "Almighty push." And the bones shot out from the ball, as well as an energy field coming out from before him, and peppered each shinobi. That day, Naruto left the village hidden in the sound with a flood of followers, more than a few of them members of the Snake Man's village submitting to him without complaint, and even more slaves crawled out from the woodwork after Naruto had ordered those with him to free the others. The boy and his followers left the village devoid of all life, leaving the place a mere smoking crater in the ground and vanishing with more than 8,000 people without a trace, not to resurface for many years. If Minato Namikaze, Yondaime Hokage of the village hidden in the leaves, was to say he had any regrets, it was not handing his twin children to Orochimaru sooner rather than trying to tolerate their existence up to when they were 3 before he gave them to the sadist. His friend had been regularly reporting that the runts had been making leaps and bounds in his care, even going as far as saying that Naruko, the holder of the soul of the nine-tailed fox, was able to bench press 300 pounds when she was 6, though Naruto was still being a disgrace to his blood by being a useless child. Orochimaru frequently said that he knew there was latent potential welled up deep in Naruto, even more than Naruto was showing, and that he would soon bring it out somehow. Orochimaru had even gone as far as saying that the boy would become high A rank when he was 10. Minato didn't really care what sort of living conditions his children were in, he just wanted Orochimaru to live up to his promise of making them worthwhile loyalists to Konoha. When he heard that Naruto had been killed and left to bleed out before her brother, he still didn't care. All that mattered was raising his youngest child, Minato, who was his only pride and joy as far as he knew. The child was born on the same day he had handed the twins to the Snake Man. After the whole Kyuubi attack, Kushina was never the same, going in and out of consciousness and in and out of sanity for 8 long years while Minato watched, helpless, as his beloved wife succumbed to madness due to having the Kyuubi ripped out of her and barely surviving. It was why Minato hated the twins with his very being. Before the last Uzumaki princess could fall headfirst into her insanity, she made love with Minato for the last time, and that was enough to make Minato Jr. a carbon copy of his father in appearance, but with the fiery spirit, emotion, and drive of his mother. It broke his heart to see his dearly loved wife being forced into a straitjacket and left in a white padded room. He tried to visit her every week, but it always broke his heart to see that she didn't recognize him at all, though he could still see a small sliver in her eye when she saw him, but disappeared after a few short seconds. Some days he couldn't get the courage to see her anymore. It was funny, a man that had bested the current Raikage on multiple occasions, created 2 jutsu that were synonymous with death, was able to move at speeds that far surpassed human logic, and was known to be the strongest ninja on the planet till date, was afraid of seeing his wife. The man had stopped visiting her a year after she had been placed in the psychiatric ward of the hospital. Much like his wife, he didn't visit the twins, not even once. All he wanted was video proof of their progress and a handwritten letter from his friend Orochimaru on what was needed. Whether it was funds or resources, Minato would send them. The thing was that the weekly report the Snake Sannin stopped abruptly 7 years ago, and after a month of silence he sent Jiraiya to investigate, even if the Toad Sage hated the Snake Summoner with boiling passion. Jiraiya returned back, pale-faced and horror-struck, and said that there was no hidden sound anymore, just a smoking massive crater in the ground. It looked Kami had brought her foot down from heaven and ground her heel on the village, destroying all life on it in one fell swoop. Minato wasn't sure what to think about the news, but decided that it was good, seeing as this confirmed the death of his son, Naruto. It was a waste of years of effort and resources on the boy, but it was also the same boy that had driven sanity away from his wife, alongside the help of his twin sister. Death was a blessing for Naruto, was what Minato thought, before he discarded sound, and even Orochimaru, from his memory. Though he did give the Snake Sannin a befitting burial and a place on the wall of fallen ninjas. His former teacher, Jiraiya, insisted that he wanted to find out what had happened, and the Yondaime allowed the investigation. As long as it didn't bother how Konoha ran, he was fine with it. Then another phenomenon occurred. A massive chunk of land, spanning many miles wide and deep, was simply scraped off the earth and disappeared. This happened a year after sound was crushed. 7 years? That was how long it took for the legendary Toad Sage to find the smallest of answers to the long question of who or what squashed the Sound Village. One of my most trusted informants, the one in Kumo, told me that when he was about to deliver a message to a friend in IWA, he saw men and women, about 20 in number, in gleaming armor underneath their clothes, marching away towards the ocean. They were going to Yuzushio? Minato asked with a quirked eyebrow. Jiraiya shook his head. I'm not sure. They were miles off point from reaching Yuzushio, and even if they were heading to Yuzu, they would never be able to pass the water defenses. Every last Uzumaki is either dead, or he hesitated and continued when the Yondaime narrowed his eyes. Or Kushina. Did you investigate this claim? Minato said to drive the topic of the conversation away from his clinically insane wife before his conscience began judging him. Yes, I did, and I found footprints going from the coastline to miles under the water. Then the trail ran cold and I had to come out of the water. How is this connected to sound? For all I know, they're just priests that take worshipping their god to a whole new level. It's because my informant said that he saw a girl with long red hair, bright purple eyes and red-rimmed glasses marching with them. He said she was bringing up the rear and that she had a long sword sheath on her hip, along with that under armor. I mean, the armor was on her fingers, her upper arms, her boots are metal, so I'm guessing everything she had under is armored. The man had vividly described the red-haired girl by saying she wore a red and gold short-sleeved shirt and black ninja pants. An Uzumaki. The Yondaime muttered in disbelief. Not just any Uzumaki. It's Karen, one of Orochimaru's test subjects, and yes, she's an Uzumaki. The name rang a bell, but he couldn't remember past a little red-haired girl serving him tea in Hidden Sound, Orochimaru's administrative office. What do you want me to do, Minato? Dig deeper, keep your ears on the ground and your eyes open. If you so much as hear a rumor of these armored men, then I want you to follow it up to the very last word. Off the shores of Kumogakure. 3 miles west of Yuzushio-gakure. Hundreds of miles in the sky. A kingdom cannot be built in a single day, or even a single year. This was especially so if the kingdom was built in the sky, on a bed of clouds, air, heavy fuinjutsu seals and motors. Naruto covered his mouth to stifle a small yawn that wanted to escape his lips as he slowly stomped down the red-carpeted hallway of his magnificent palace. The redhead, now a 16-year-old, was in a short-sleeved red and gold shirt with black pants. Under his shirt was black armor that contrasted his red shirt but at the same time didn't slow him down. The boy clenched his segmented armored fingers and ran it through his shaggy, but clean, red hair, and idly nodded to the deep bow of the guards standing outside his throne room. He walked in and was immediately met with an ageless woman with fiery red hair and eyes, with a heart-shaped face and a kind smile as she bent her knees in greeting to her master. Naruto regarded her briefly with his red-ringed eyes before he proceeded to his glorious throne, made out of precious metals that sparkled and lit up the entire, extremely wide throne room. The art and decor of the room was magnificent, depicting creatures of myths and poses, but this didn't stop eyes from staying on the throne. The teen took his seat on the throne and reclined to the side, swinging his right leg over the armrest, and slouching with his head perched on his left palm as the woman walked up to his left side and leaned down to speak to him. She was in a long black dress that could easily pass off as a ball gown but with the white apron over her torso and the dainty sandals on her feet, that is, if one could get a glimpse at her feet, one would see dainty black sandals. The wrists of her dress frilled out slightly, stylishly, and from her straight, almost even rigid, posture it was obvious she was the combat maid that doubled up as the head of the palace workers. Her small black painted lips smiled at her master, and she closed her eyes as she spoke to Naruto, who listened as red, gold and black clothed with platinum under-armored soldiers, dressed similarly to him with their armor under their clothes but with forehead protectors having the kanji for sky on them and red armbands on their left upper arms with their divisions clearly written on it. The spacious room allowed them in and they increased to 10, while still leaving a lot of room for more, but the doors were closed by the guards there. Good news, my lord, our spies in Fire Country have sent word back that they have placed themselves in minor positions of authority. Her eyes flicked to the soldiers as they all stood in a row before the throne and fell onto their knees before Naruto, their eyes to the ground and their heads inclined. A few of them are among the Fire Daimyo's close confidants. That is good news. Naruto hummed and the woman bobbed her head in agreement. Would it be possible to take the throne? Yes, my lord. Then tell them to begin preparations. But I want Fire Country, specifically Konoha, to be the last place I take over. I want them to see their defeat coming. She pointed at a man, a samurai with his weapon placed before him as a sign of subservience to Naruto, and she jerked her head to the door. I trust you will ensure they do it discreetly. Of course, my lord. He got to his feet, saluted with his sword across his chest to Naruto, and hurried out. Your forces are ready for global domination, my lord Naruto. Here his eyes brightened but he didn't change position. Is that so? Yes, sir, the heads of each combat-related division in the kingdom have reported that, by normal shinobi equivalent, the least of their forces is special jounin rank. Then we begin our plans as soon as possible, Shinikura. He sat up and the woman dropped to her knees and hung on to his every word as he said to the warriors in the room. Introduce yourselves. Your name and division. His Rinnegan didn't allow him the pleasure of forgetting information, but with all the excitement that was about to happen he wanted them to remind him of all he had been able to do for the kingdom by saying their divisions they headed. He motioned from right to left, and the first person on the right spoke. Nirvana Kurgaku. Invention Division. She said with a wide, possibly crazed, grin and a crisp salute. It was a multicolored-haired girl with blue and red, heterochromatic eyes, red on the right and blue on the left. She was the one that headed all the engineers, mechanics and technicians on creating inventions that moved the kingdom forwards. They were even the ones that made the motors that kept the entire kingdom floating in the sky and the security systems that ensure no outsider knew or were able of gaining entry. I am forever at your service, my lord, she said with her eyes lowered. A bald 6-foot-tall, heavily muscled man was next. Hamato Toshi. Intelligence and Interrogation Division. He was among the few people that had managed to survive 20 years of continuous torture from the snake Sannin, and this endurance had taught him the best ways of getting information out of any living being. He commanded a division that could retrieve information from even the tightest-lipped, most loyal person, and there was very little information he couldn't gather. His division shared the intelligence responsibility with the Scout Division. I am at your service, King Naruto, he said in his gruff voice. Karen Uzumaki. Medical Division. The redhead bowed deeply to her lord with a sweet smile on her face. She had been hiding in an underground lab and sound when over a dozen former slaves marched in and easily overpowered her. They brought her to Naruto and he was about to kill her without batting an eyelid but stopped when she swore her undying loyalty to him, after watching him crush Yugo, Sakan, Yukon and Kimimaro into bloody paste. It was obvious to the boy that she was in love with the power he held, and he chose to keep her alive until she turned against him. "My life is yours, my king," she trilled. Mora. Hunter Ninja Division. This was a deeply tanned man in an eggshell white Hunter Ninja mask with red markings that looked like slashes across the surface and the painted kanji of the kingdom on his forehead. He headed the division, or department, that ventured outside the kingdom and collected bounties so as to increase the wealth of the kingdom. He worked hand in hand with his twin sister, who was the head of the Scout and Retrieval Division. "I am eternally grateful for your mercy, my king." Nora. Scout and Retrieval Division. The twin of the Hunter Ninja head looked identical to him besides the mask she wore, which was coal black and had white slashes on the surface. Naruto knew how they looked underneath the mask, but they hid their faces out of shame for having them destroyed by Orochimaru's experiments. The Lord didn't question it, merely allowed them their freedom, and in return they gave him their unrelenting loyalty. "I am eternally grateful for your kindness, my master." Yuakuso. Infiltration and Espionage Division. The man had blazing white hair that was tied up in a ponytail. He had kind black eyes and a friendly smile for his imperial king as he bowed smoothly after introducing himself. The white-haired head of spies was the one that deployed those to infiltrate and gain the trust of the people in countries and villages all over the continent, all for his lord. "I swear my life to you, King Naruto." Magi Harai Gamatomo. Fuinjutsu Division. The mint-haired girl that spoke timidly was just barely 15 years old. A prodigy in the art of seals, Naruto saw her potential as far back as when he had liberated her from her cage. She stood out among those that chose to study Fuinjutsu because she was the youngest, 8 years old, and the most vocal of her love for seals. She was especially dedicated to Naruto and his ambitions and had since been pumping out seals from her division to fortify the kingdom. Along with her forehead protector, under armor, and the armband, she also had on a bright green backpack with pictures of unicorns and rainbows dancing on it. "My soul is yours, sir." Satoshi Todoroki. Rescue and Support Division. He had frizzy blonde hair, making it look like he had been electrocuted, and calm teal green eyes. His weapon, a bow staff, was securely slung on his back as he bent his knees in greeting to his lord. Another of his division's responsibilities was internal security, therefore the police fell under his command. "At your service, Master Naruto." Indra Watashi. Frontline Soldiers Division. This man had dull eyes and limp black hair that flopped as he bowed deeply to Naruto, who looked at him and nodded back as he did with the others so far. On his back was a large zanbato that, even from a distance, people would recognize as the Kubikaribaku, the deadly head cleaver sword of the 7 Swords of the Mist. Naruto had given him the blade after a particular scouting mission to wave with the masked twins. He initially went to wave to see if he could catch a quick glimpse of the Konoha shinobi before they returned back home, to better gauge their strength up close because Kakashi of the Sharingan was there, a high-rank shinobi. "I am humbled to be in your presence, sir." The men and women before him were physical manifestations of Naruto's efforts. They had been the ones to stay closest to Naruto at the very beginning and help sort the thousands of people that depended on him because by himself he couldn't administer to them alone. The scrolls and documents he had acquired from Orochimaru's village were what he had them study, after they picked the areas they wished to specialize in. Like every person on the Flying Kingdom, they were willing to die for him. That thought made Naruto smile, a small upward curve of his lips, but it was still enough to make them glow with pride and puff out their chests. The absolute control he had over them never ceased to astound him. "Since we are closest to Lightning Country at the moment, and since it is on the very edge of the continent, we will begin there right away." "Yes, Lord Naruto. I want our spies to begin executing key officials in the Lightning Country capital and the Hunter Ninja Division to take care of the shinobi forces that are stationed on outposts bordering Kumo. There will be no mercy whatsoever. Am I understood?" "Yes, Lord Naruto. I will personally oversee the takeover. Even if it takes months, I want the world to come under my sole rule." He looked at Magi, the head of the Fuinjutsu Division. "Have you finished administering the flight seals?" The girl tilted her head down as she replied, a small stutter in her voice. "Yes, sir. The seals are fully operational and are quite simple to use." Flight seals were something the Fuinjutsu Division had been working on for weeks. It was 2 small seals placed on the feet, the toes and the heel, that allowed the user to fly but only for short periods of time. Some of the ninjas that didn't need them, or want them, were mostly from the Interrogation Division and the Invention Division, the latter because they preferred using their own inventions to fly. "Good. Are the emergency medical vehicles fully stocked or ready to be used?" he asked Karen, the medic, and Nirvana, the inventor, and they saluted. "Yes, Lord Naruto. We have decided to have teams of 4 medics and 2 engineers inside each EMV," Karen said. "There is a fleet of over 100 EMVs ready and waiting for your command, my lord," Nirvana finished with a satisfied hum. She had designed the vehicles herself and had presented it to Naruto for approval, with Karen's presence and support. They pitched the idea that if a soldier was injured on the field, they needed a secured way of getting them to safety and healing them. Thus, the EMV was created. All right. Assemble your subordinates and have them prepare to enter Kumo first. For this first invasion, I want it to be as subtle and unexpected as possible. After that, we can make as much noise as we want. Dismissed. The soldiers marched out of the throne, leaving Naruto with his personal maid. The teen tapped his iron-armored fingers on his comfortable throne, in deep thought. I've decided to join in the infiltration. The red-haired maid's eyebrows shot up in surprise. Are you sure, my lord? I'm certain that your forces are perfectly capable of handling the other shinobi with ease. Naruto nodded in agreement. I know that. I have seen their training regimen and compared it to that of the major 5 hidden villages. It is considerably harder. If anything, I delayed the global domination to make sure everything would go off without a problem. I merely want to be there physically because I want to personally see what my forces can do, not reports or even videos. When it comes down to it, leave the Kages or those that are highest rank for me. They might pose a small challenge, but it will still be a nice exercise crushing their bodies into dust. The woman chuckled in amusement. As you wish, my lord. I also need to lead by example. I cannot, for the life of me, sit down and order people to fight if I cannot fight myself. My lord, you do not need to prove yourself. The people serve you because your sheer presence rejuvenates their zeal. Naruto waved flippantly at her. I'm sure. He got to his feet and both proceeded to the main doors, which led outside the great palace. Shinokora followed behind him in a walk so smooth it looked like she was floating. As the guards opened the great doors for their lord to pass, their eyes beheld the glorious garden before the palace, where lush grass grew, well-trimmed hedges flourished, and trees were neatly arranged and maintained. Naruto walked on through the paved path leading to the gate, and as he did so he ran his fingers over the back of his hands, and the under armor he wore rippled and stopped. Intricate seals glowed blue over the armor. His right hand reached to his right silently, and Shinokora brought out a black helmet from her sleeve, a miraculous display for those not used to seeing it, and gave it to Naruto, who placed it over his head. The helmet shimmered as Naruto placed it on his head, recognizing Naruto's chakra network and linking with the armor he had under his clothes. All high-rank soldiers of the kingdom wore their armor under their clothes, so that when they were summoned by their king they didn't need to spend half an hour placing it on. The armor, a masterpiece created from the joint work of the invention and Fuinjutsu division, was comfortable to wear anywhere and was equipped with a seal that could make it seem invisible. Though Naruto preferred his armor to be seen, he had the only obsidian black armor in all the kingdom, symbolizing his position as lord and king of the kingdom. The kingdom hidden in the skies, or the Great Tsukai Kingdom, was a highly advanced civilization. Naruto was reminded of that fact as he stood at the gate before his palace, placed on a high rise that gave him a great view of the entire kingdom. His godly eyes took its time to look at all the advancements and progress his kingdom had made for the past 7 years after more than a few of them left sound with him. The buildings were mostly high-rise, the roads were tarred and people moved around without fear. Many miles away from the palace were numerous squares of land for farming and herding as well as training grounds for his soldiers. By normal standards, the kingdom looked futuristic and more sophisticated than the crude lives people lived in the nations below them. Ever so gently Naruto's feet lifted off the ground and he hovered away. His Rinnegan eyes quivered slightly and Shinokora followed suit, floating laxly straight forward. He always had the option of taking a vehicle to the kingdom's gate, but he enjoyed looking at his accomplishments, which was why he liked flying over Tsukai. People looked up and began pointing at them, 2 figures in the sky, but it was obvious they knew it was him and Shinokora. They started cheering and hooting and he reclined in the air as he drifted, relaxing with his hands behind his head and his left leg crossed over his right. Shinokora watched her master, the king of Tsukai Kingdom, take in the praises his people were giving him masterfully, without gloating or preening under their attention. The air was calm and the smell of the sea made her feel at ease. Do you wish for me to fight as well, my king? Yes. You still want retribution against Konoha, right? She bowed her head to hide the wild grin on her face, exposing long, animalistic canines. Her heart thudded with expectation and Naruto didn't need to look at her to know that she really wanted to step on Konoha. If you will allow me. He was still her master, and she couldn't even imagine herself going against his rule, so she patiently waited for him to reply. I will allow it. There are plenty of countries we have to subdue before it's Konoha's turn. He said smoothly and gently landed on his feet, controlling Shinokora to do so as well. I give you permission to not hold back. The woman bowed her head in thanks. You will not regret it, my lord. Naruto nodded and passed her, making her hastily scamper back to her feet and enter the royal vehicle with Naruto. It was painted gold and red with black trimmings on the doors. The four wheels were powerful and were able to endure a lot of damage, while the windows and doors were capable of taking multiple attacks without cracking. The driver, an old man with gray hair, turned on the car as his lord entered and drove the car through the gate. The driver stopped the car over a flat green platform over the black road and flipped a switch over his head, making the tires latch onto the surface. The car hummed and lifted off the ground, gliding down to earth, with a fleet of soldiers flying after it, numbering in the thousands and using the newly administered flight seals. The car and the soldiers shimmered in the sun and camouflaged with the sky, hiding their presence from those below them. Shinokora, sitting in a rigid posture beside her lord, turned her head and looked out of the window at the landscape of the earth, lost in thought. She was the soul of the nine-tailed fox, Kyubi no Kitsune. Naruto, after many months of deep meditation, had brought her soul back from the Shinigami's grasp and placed it in a body of his own creation. Initially he intended to resurrect his sister but found out that the Shinigami kept Naruto in his pocket for reasons he didn't understand. The Rinnegan made him aware that with the ability to remove souls from people's bodies he could also drag souls back from the dead and place them into bodies, but only once a year. When he was not able to reach his sister he pulled out the nine-tailed fox, and the death god allowed him to take her. The body he prepared for her was from a grass kunoichi that had attempted to attack his budding kingdom during the days they were still on the ground. The change in hair, eye color, physique, chakra and general appearance came about as he forced the soul of the fox into the human body, after making sure that the grass ninja's soul had vacated it and that the body was well fortified to accept the soul of a tailed beast. The demon chakra Naruto had in him couldn't return to her, not while he was still alive, but in spite of that she was still a force to be reckoned with. When she had been revived she made a blood oath to serve his lineage as gratitude for bringing her back. The Rinnegan King still vowed to bring his sister back one day, but he still needed to figure out how to pry Naruto out of the grip of the death god. The car trembled a little as it touched down, and she got out of the car with Naruto. The ninjas dropped down around them, more than enough to make it look like a sea of humanity standing on the sea and waiting for his command. The Lord of Tsukai narrowed his Rinnegan eyes from under his helmet and turned to Kumogakure, the hidden village in lightning country that bordered the sea. Let's go. And their forms, from Naruto and Shinokora, to the very last soldier standing at attention out on the sea, flickered out of sight as their armor hid them from view. For the Reikage, the day started like any other day. He woke up, got out of bed, got decent enough to leave his house and go to the office for another day of monotonous paperwork and agreement deals with both obscure and suspicious villages and countries. At exactly 8 in the morning his lively built, silver-haired secretary waltzed in, dropped a stack of paper for him to deal with and left wordlessly. Recently she had been mad at him that he was having talks with the Wagakure, a village she detested with her whole being for reasons he didn't wish to share with her Kaige. She had assured him it wasn't important, so he shrugged it off. After she had left, another Jounin entered his office to report on the current state of his ninjas on missions outside of Kumo and Lightning Country. He had expected the man to say the usual. They all reported back that they were fine, but was mildly alarmed when the other ninja informed him that the radios were offline. That meant they couldn't get information from those in the field and they couldn't get information out. It was a very urgent development, and A conveyed that by yelling for the ninja to have it fixed immediately before he went back to skimming through paper. It was a change, but a bad change. The communication system for any village, hidden or not, was its beating heart. The leader's office was the brain. The heart of the village was connected with the hearts of other villages it was allied to, and if that heart was in danger, and it was not able to beat, then it wouldn't be able to convey their distress to other villages. It basically left them alone in the world, like an island. Not even the outpost station around the village could communicate back to home base or even to each other. At that very moment at the Information and Communication Center for Kumogakure, the computer engineer called to fix the system scratched his head in thought as he stared straight at the damaged system. It was clear that 3 to 4 sword strokes had slashed apart the main servers, and that was what brought down the other chain servers connected to it. He shook his head sadly, and the head of communications hovering over his shoulder raised an eyebrow. Is there a problem? Don't you have eyes, idiot? This thing is totally damaged. The head scoffed and rolled his eyes. Of course I can see that. I mean, can you get it fixed? That's what you're paying me for, was the sharp reply as he shone his flashlight at the server box, located in a metal box at the very center of the room with smaller servers situated on the edges of the room and chairs placed before them for people to sit on and remain in constant communication with those outside. But it'll take me at least 6 hours to replace everything and connect those other boxes back to it, he said as he pointed his light to the other dead servers. Well, get to it already. Hi, don't rush me, the man said as he put his flashlight in his mouth and rummaged through his toolbox, bringing out a screwdriver and beginning to unscrew the bolts holding the server in place. He furrowed his eyebrows and glanced over his shoulder as his hands busily worked. Hey, what's wrong with the electricity? The whole one-story building was in pitch blackness, making him wonder why it had happened. He was sure that as he entered there was light. "Are you just noticing?" "I wasn't exactly idle, you know," the engineer shot back as he made exaggerated movements of unscrewing a screw. The head of the center allowed the sharp-tongued reply to roll off his shoulders. "It's been on the fritz since sunrise. I'm not sure why, but we think some idiot used a lightning jutsu in the electrical room." He watched animatedly as the engineer removed the bulk of the servers in on strong yank, placed it aside and began removing the colored wires connected to it. "Speaking of lightning jutsu, don't you think you should report that the main servers were brutally attacked?" There was a low thump behind him, and his eyebrows lowered. "Hey, did you hear what I said?" Still no answer, just painful silence. The man huffed and whirled around, releasing hold of the wires in his grip. "I said, are you going to ha?" Before him lay the head of the communications center, split in half from his head to his pelvis and bleeding all over the floor. Over his body stood a black-haired man with silver armor under his red and gold shirt and trousers, armor that even covered his fingers and his neck. There wasn't even a speck of blood on his clothes. The civilian engineer began sputtering as the katana-wielding murderer looked at him with a small smirk before he turned around and began stomping out of the door, where a small group of others dressed similarly, but instead of red shirts they were in blue and black with silver shoulder plates, forearm protectors and shin guards, waited for him. They spared the man a final glance before they left the building. The young engineer sighed in relief, placing his hand over his heart and panting at his close brush with death. He shot to his feet to report what had happened to the wreckage. The bleeding corpse before him was giving him the chills. The brutality of the kill was almost too much, but when he straightened onto his feet his head rolled off his shoulders. He didn't even know that his neck had been sliced by the man. As his headless body fell down to the ground it joined the throng of others littered around the room, counting up to about 15 headless corpses of people that had been in the building and trying to figure out what was wrong with the servers. The black-haired killer flicked his bloody weapon to his side and sheathed it on his hip in one slick movement. The subordinate shinobi with him, 5 in number, looked at him in expectation. "Captain Eagle I wants us to circle around the village and stand guard outside Kumo's ANBU headquarters while he and his team clean it out. We're to pick them off as they run out," the man said to them, and they nodded curtly as they zipped through the shadows, away from the eyes of civilians who were none the wiser that their village was steadily coming undone. They made it in time to see a swarm of camouflage group of ninjas, roughly 50 wearing red shirts and bronze shoulder pads, forearm and shin guards, bronze boots and gloves. The fact their armor wasn't all over their body and under their clothes symbolized their low rank in the Sukai Kingdom's army, unlike the silver, gold, platinum and obsidian ranks, kicking open the door and flying inside in bursts of wind from their feet. Their weapons fell down as their feet did. The building branched off in 8 directions and the soldiers of the Sukai split up and blurred down through the darkly lit to the living quarters of Kumo's Black Ops, the commander's office, and the training grounds. Why wasn't the building on fire with alarms? The answer came when a middle-aged man with bleached blonde hair removed a plastic box with 2 red and blue wires coming out from the top from the circuit breaker inside the electrical room of the building. He had short-circuited the electrical systems and fried the security seals, an addition from Magi the few injuts ahead. As he slipped out from the room and drew his weapons, a bow and arrow, from a seal on his wrists, which in turn made his hidden under-armor flicker into sight. Golden armor. He waited for the bronze-armored soldiers to fly by before he followed as well. He was one of the many spies that had infiltrated the ranks of the village. His mission had started 2 years ago, when he had been handpicked by the head of his division, Uekuso, as well as 10 others, because of their high concentration of lightning chakra. It was this high concentration that allowed them to have citizenships for Kumogakure, saying they were refugees from the Kiryagakure. How were they able to find the ANBU quarters? The place was the best hid location in all of Lightning Country. The only way for them to know how to get there was to be let in by Black Ops. That was where the middle-aged man came in. As he entered the mess hall he drew his weapon and fired 5 consecutive arrows around him, stabbing the heads and hearts of his comrades in the ANBU, relishing in the betrayal in their eyes as they fought against the bronze soldiers of Sukai. He waltzed through the chaos and noise, confident that every escape route was blocked by Sukai soldiers, his real comrades, idly slashing up shinobi that leaped at him with the sharp edges of his bow. He got to the door at the very end of the mess hall and reached over his shoulder for an arrow. He jammed the arrow into the keyhole and the seals on the weapon fried those on the door and eased open the door slowly. He crossed his bow across his chest when a lightning strike shot out from the door and the commander of the ANBU bolted out. The silver rank soldier grounded his teeth as the lightning jutsu pushed him away. A few stray arcs slammed into the backs of a few bronze rank soldiers and threw their concentration off for Kumo ANBU to land critical hits. His metal boots gained traction and he spun around the attack, dodging it as it flashed past his nose, drew his arrow and shot a single one straight forward. The arrow whistled through the air and was deflected by another summoned bolt of lightning, but the man's distraction cost him. a bronze soldier slid up behind him and sheathed his tanto in his chest, through his heart. His armored hands went up quickly and snapped the dark-skinned man's head to the left in one smooth motion, just to make sure. The bronze soldier allowed the man to crumple onto his knees and fall flat onto the side of his face, dead. The chirpy, blue-haired bronze girl waved happily to her superior as she unsheathed her blade from the dead body. The silver soldier sent her a thumb up and shot down the last few surviving ANBU, banking on the distraction from the bronze ranks. He signaled for them to move out and meet the others at the end of the hidden building as he pulled out a headset from the same wrist storage seal he kept his weapons. He placed it on his head and held down the right ear as he spoke, watching his subordinates rush out of the mess hall to other rooms to subdue or kill ANBU, mostly subdue. "This is Captain Eagle Eye. Patch me over to Division Head Yuakuso." "Patching you over, please wait," was the reply from the receiver, and 2 seconds later there was a small buzz in his ear and the lilting voice of his head of division. Yu was currently sitting in the Raikage secretary's chair, his feet placed on her desk and reading a magazine. "I'm listening, Eagle Eye," he hummed as he licked his finger and flicked the page. The quivering woman kneeling before her former desk blubbered please silently, as she felt the sharp edge of a blade on the side of her neck. Yu ignored her as he partly paid attention to his deputy head of division. Requesting to lend help to Hunter Ninja Division outside Kumo. Eagle Eye began stalking forward, stepping over the dead bodies of Kumo ANBU as he did so. "Can I ask why?" Yu said as he raised his hand for the silver rank about to kill. The secretary raised his weapon to cut off her head, making him pause. The platinum rank soldier cocked his head to the dark-skinned civilian woman and placed a finger on his lips to tell her to keep quiet. She clenched her eyes shut tightly and clasped her hands together, silently pleading for mercy. "We are just about done in the ANBU headquarters. You have my permission, but make sure you don't interfere with the hunters. You know how much they hate that." "Noted. Eagle Eye out," the older man said as he walked out from the back door of the quarters. Before him were about 4 dozen ANBU operative on their knees and at the mercy of the Sukai soldiers. His orders weren't to have all of them executed but subdued, and their numbers seemed fairly sufficient, so the silver rank ordered half of those present, 50 or so, to move to the outposts bordering Kumo and the others to wait for a squad from the Scouting and Retrieval Division to arrive and contain the submissive shinobi. They were to meet the others chasing fleeing Kumo ninjas when that happened. The king had a list of villages he intended to drastically reduce the number of the shinobi force to quell any thoughts or plans for a revolt any time soon. Kumo was on that list. Meanwhile, Yu sharply got to his feet and fell on his knees as Naruto walked up the stairs, Shinikora right behind him in her rigid posture and her serene smile. The Rinnegan king looked at Yu, then to the cowering civilian that had been forced on her hands and knees at Naruto's appearance by the silver rank holding the blade to her neck. There were 20 golden ranks lined on the walls in the secretary's office, just behind the door to the kage, and they too fell on one knee and placed their right hands over their hearts, a sign of subservience to their leader. Naruto's lips quirked up and he waved for the silver rank to move aside as he stared down at the petrified woman, who looked up at him with an erratically beating heart. "What is your name?" Naruto said in a low voice, and the silver-haired woman gulped deeply. "Mamabui, sir." She correctly gauged that since the platinum under-armored man, who commanded the golden-armored people around them, readily fell onto his knees when Naruto arrived, he was the supreme leader of all the invaders. She was the Raikage's personal secretary, that gave her the privilege, or bad luck, of seeing various things others wouldn't normally see, and on multiple occasions her life had been in mortal danger. But this situation was different. She didn't even hear any scream from the village or struggle. The armored soldiers merely marched into the room and got her onto her knees. She knew the look in their eyes. They had no problem killing a defenseless civilian woman whatsoever, as long as it made their ultimate master happy. "Mabui, I have a question," Naruto asked slowly as he squatted down to her, his red-ringed eyes glowing with amusement when she tried to shuffle away but was stopped when Shinikora grabbed the back of her neck to keep her in place. Mabui swallowed thickly and whispered, "Yes, sir?" "Are you scared?" Naruto said to her, and he added with a flash of his terrifying Rinnegan eyes. "And don't lie to me." Why yes, sir. I'm scared." Naruto stood up and motioned for his personal maid to release Mabui. "Good. You should be very scared of my men." He smiled coolly with his Rinnegan eyes closed. "And of me. I have a lot of things planned for you, Mabui, but for now we have to part. Run along." He nodded behind him to the door, and Mabui wasted no time hurtling out of it, only to stop when she saw all the staff in the Raikage's office on the knees and their shoulders lowered. Silver ranks patrolled around them with their weapons drawn. One caught sight of her and ordered her to get onto her knees. "My lord Naruto, you, the head of the Infiltration and Espionage Division, said to get the attention of his master." Naruto hummed in reply and looked at him. "Should we kill them all?" "No, we want the world to submit to Sukai and to me," Killing them all and leaving the world empty would negate that plan. Naruto wanted the whole world, all the nations in it, and every living creature that had sense to be under his grasp. He didn't want to have any direct control over them, just their submission to his imperial rule. He had already planned what he would do after taking over the world, a global fighting tournament between nations. The winning nation would have his favor for the time being. When he got bored with that, he already had another plan. Understood, sir. Shinokura moved aside as Naruto walked to the door of the Raikage, who still wasn't aware that his village had been successfully taken over. Naruto raised his left hand and dragged it back, ripping the door right off its hinges in one clean motion and throwing it away for it to slam onto the ground, safely away from his soldiers. A got onto his feet in alarm, glaring hotly at the perpetrator, a 6-foot-tall teen with crimson red hair and black eyes with red concentric circles going from the dot pupil outwards. The boy was in a deep red shirt with the kanji for Sky King on it, with obsidian black armor under his clothes, even his fingers and metal boots on his feet. His eyes lifted up over the teen's shoulder to see dozens of similarly dressed, but gold under-armored men and women, standing at attention behind him with a royal maid directly behind Naruto and a man with platinum under-armor, who gave him a hidden smile as he looked at them. This observation happened in 2 seconds. Who the hell are you? The man roared as lightning crackled over his body. He clenched his gauntlets as this happened and his white hair frizzed up. My name is King Naruto and I am the ruler of the Tsukai Kingdom. The Tsukai Kingdom? Why haven't I heard of that place before? The Raikage thought but refused to let his full attention waver from the obviously dangerous teen before him, who stood with his arms crossed and shoulders relaxed. How dare you attack me? In my own home? I would have thought you would notice, but my people have completely subdued this village with little to no problem. I expected a bigger struggle, if I'm going to be honest, Naruto said with a small disappointed sigh. A growl madly as lightning arced of his body in burning waves, scorching his desk and the walls around him, but the boy didn't even seem fazed, rather he looked bored. You will pay with your life. The Kage shot a bolt of lightning at Naruto that was so hot that it glowed deep purple. A transparent barrier covered Naruto from the fatal attack and his Rinnegan pulsed in enjoyment, as he began draining the Kage's chakra with the Rinnegan ability. It was too late for the man to cut the attack off when he noticed the repercussions. Naruto kept on siphoning out the lightning Kage's chakra, watching with glee as he fell onto his knees when his chakra became too low. Naruto stopped and cocked his head to the side, intrigued when he saw the tired Kage pan heavily, dragging himself back to his feet and holding his fist up in a fighting style. Interesting. You clearly don't know when you are outmatched, Naruto commented. Outmatched? What's that mean? Said as he shook the sleep out of his eyes. He was severely low on chakra. Naruto snorted, a small laugh that made the warriors stationed behind him chuckle under their breath with him. You are resilient, I admire that, but you see, if your people see that, it will give them hope. I can't have that. A great force closed around the Kage's neck and lifted him off his feet. Naruto's red-ringed eyes followed the floating man and smashed his body out of the window. Naruto flew after him and levitated high over the submissive village. His right hand shot to A and caught him after commanding gravity to bring him over. The Tsukai warriors that were holding down the civilians and every other person in the village looked up and hailed when they saw Naruto holding the Kage by his neck, making the silver-haired man grit at the strength behind the hold but wasn't able to summon the strength to pry it off him. The king of Tsukai Kingdom lifted his other hand for silence. This is your leader. This is the one that was meant to protect you and he has failed. Naruto shouted for all to hear, his voice echoing far and wide in the deathly silence that fell upon the village. The citizens of Kumo were shocked into silence at the desperate situation their Raikage was in. Bow down to me and I will not destroy this village. The people were on their knees, but after seeing that even their Raikage, the strongest man in the village, was at the mercy of the godlike boy, they fell forward onto their hands in a bowed position. Naruto smiled a little and addressed the man in his hands. See? There is nothing you or anyone can do to stand against me. I didn't even have to do anything, but my soldiers still succeeded. My brother and Yujito will avenge me. Grated as he wheezed for air. I'm sure they will, that's why I'm having my hunters find and force them to their knees. Those Jinchuriki would serve well in my kingdom, Naruto said with a wide smile. You will never win, were his last words before Naruto closed his fists tightly, snapping his neck and killing him. Naruto's smile lessened as he whispered to A, I already have, and allowed his dead body to drop out of the sky, all to the uproarious cheers and hooting of his men. The forests north of Kumogakure. 3 miles away from the nearest outpost. Lightning Country. Who the hell are these guys? Yujito yelled as she hopped from tree to tree, Away from the surging black mass of people that doggedly followed after her, leading them was a heavily tanned man in a white hunter ninja mask with a woman with multicolored hair jumping along with him, with curious-looking heavy boots that had fans spinning on the soles. The woman maneuvered the boots like she had been born with them, but the obvious hunter merely jumped from tree to tree after her the conventional way. The different color-haired girl cackled in glee as she spun dexterously in the air, leaving behind a small trail of white smoke that cleared up moments later. Behind the pair were at least 6 other hunters, and 2 more people wearing the flying boot contraption. B, who was speeding on the ground with his own group of hunters after him, yelled back. No idea he stopped speaking and hissed when a spear connected to a gleaming silver chain skimmed past his side, barely scraping his skin but not drawing blood. Let's kill them! Yujito shouted and whirled around in the air before her friend could reply. She slashed the air and blew fiery after images came out from her nails, flashing towards the stalkers. Mora, the head of the Hunter Ninja Division, and Nirvana, the head of the Invention Division, signaled to their subordinates, many masked men and women in silver underarmor, and they dispersed before the deadly claws could reach them. She stopped on a tree branch and her senses made her aware that the hunters were surrounding her with the 3 contraption using ninjas in a triangle, and the hunters filling in the gaps. The one that seemed to be the head hunter hopped forward and drew a deadly-looking red kunai from the back of his armored wrists, crossing them to block the elongated claw strikes from Yujito. Blue chakra shrouded her body suddenly and Mora ducked away hastily when he saw his weapons melt against it. He tapped his ear and communicated to Nirvana. She's using it. Hi, containment field will be operational in 15 seconds. Keep her in the triangle. What do you think I've been doing? Mora whispered hotly back to the inventor as he used his hands to swing from a branch and landed on another as dangerous claws burnt the branch to nothing. Stay still, bug! The Jinchuriki for the 2-tailed cat roared as she pelted after the man, who diligently managed to dodge her killer attacks. As his feet touched down on a tree branch within the triangle, he quickly tapped it with his right pointer and middle finger, creating a quick seal, and leaping off in time before a crazed Yujito could sink her teeth into his neck. The seal covered her in a plume of smoke and trapped her. The woman channeled even more chakra and the seals burned off her not even 3 seconds later. The containment field is ready. Get the hell out of there. The questionably sane head of inventors muttered into her headpiece. Roger, was Mora's response, then signaled to one of his subordinates, who smashed at his heel of his left hand on the branch above him, breaking it off cleanly and throwing the broken chunk of wood to his right, which was when the platinum rank hunter, Mora, switched places with it in a flash of smoke, leaving behind the cut-off branch. The beast's chakra-shrouded woman snarled when she saw this and pelted to him at top speed. Do it now! I hear ya, no need to yell sheesh. The platinum rank inventor, Nirvana, grumbled as she clapped her hands together in sync with her subordinates in the Invention Division. The forest lit up in a glorious flash of light, stunning Yujito momentarily, and when she opened her eyes she saw that she was in a glass cube that spanned about 15 feet from her place in the middle. Her face slammed into the glass in front of Mora when her feet couldn't stop in time from her headlong run. The man didn't even flinch as he stared back at her, making her notice that he had bright blue eyes. Yujito's fist blazed on his face, but the thick glass never even cracked, even as she pumped in more chakra in her attack and her body ignited on fire. She fully activated her tailed beast cloak, transforming her into the 2-tailed demon cat, but that change was short-lived. Mora placed his palm onto the surface of the containment field, not able to feel the heat on the surface under his platinum-armored fingers, and a great seal opened up under his palm. He turned his hand, like he was turning a knob on a gas stove, and several flashes of light exploded inside the containment field, shocking the 2-tailed cat and making her stumble around. He turned the seal even more and watched as the beast's chakra fell off the cat in clumps as a vibration resonated inside the cube so heavily that the cat could feel it shake up her bones, and a sharp pinging sound rang painfully in the cube for only the keen-eared cat to hear. The deadly chakra was then absorbed into the cube as quickly as possible, until Yujito was left on her side in the very center. Unconscious. Works like a charm. Well done, Nirvana. Mora said to his headpiece, and the inventor chuckled bashfully in appreciation. Let's push this containment field down to size and call a retrieval squad to take her back to Sukai. Hi. Nirvana answered and began pushing from her side on the glass surface with the other hunters and inventors, and the cube began shrinking. The shoulder-length multicolor-haired woman spared her right hand to press against her receiver as she said, How is it going down there, Gore? Gore was the deputy head of the Hunter Ninja Division, a short red-masked man that used a mighty war hammer as his chosen weapon. He was wild and vicious by nature. It was understandable that he had gotten it from years of being on the receiving end of mass beatings from dozens of sound shinobi. Naruto named him Gore after being an audience to a particular mission to Kiri to gather information like the one to Wave. Gore tore through any and every living creature before him, besides his comrades, with the ferocity of a feral lion. Most weren't aware, but under Gore's mask was a large, needle-teeth-filled mouth, no nose and no eyes. He was among the group of people that had been mercilessly tortured and experimented on, like Naruto and the head of intelligence and interrogation, Hamato Toshi. Among many others. Gore licked his lips and said, "He's down for the count." He tapped the glass box that held the knocked-out Eight-Tails holder, wishing he could just enter inside and rip the man's arms off. He only held his urges because his lord, Naruto, would frown on that action. That was akin to death for Gore. He had put up a valiant fight, making use of as many skills in his arsenal, but it could only last so long with the evasive tactics the hunters chasing him used and the brutal forwardness of Gore, forced to either dodge the hammer strikes or else it would have crushed his head. Unlike Yujito, he didn't really use the eight-tailed beast's chakra until it was much too late, and he was stuck inside a containment field with a persistent vibration shaking up his chakra core and a painful ringing in his ear. The hunters and inventors that were outside the field pushed hard on the glass surface, and the size lessened till the cube was just about 6 feet wide. The golden-armored maniac called Gore looked to his subordinates as he hefted his weapon onto his shoulders. "Has anyone called a retrieval team?" he asked, and was answered by a blue-eyed, black-masked woman sitting down on the cube that contained Kurabi. The cube containing Yujito was placed on the ground beside the male Jinchurikis. "I came as soon as I got the call from Mora." She crossed her legs and pointed her fingers upwards to the large, flying retrieval vehicle hovering above them, over the dense forest, because there wasn't enough space to get any closer. It was similar to a land vehicle, but it had no wheels, with a small area where the driver sat, and a large behind that stored those that were to be retrieved, as well as a few scouts to help go down and bring back those to be recovered. It never ceased to amaze Gore that a vehicle as large as the retrieval truck was capable of being so silent. Nora, the platinum rank head of the scout and retrieval division, patted the glass to her side, and her brother took a seat beside her, seemingly from out of nowhere. He slung his arm around her shoulder, and she wrapped her own around his side, cuddling close to him. The sight might have been a bit too strange and intimate for others, but the hunters and scouts were suited to seeing it, and on a few rare occasions other divisions too. There was even a rumor going around that the masked twins slept with each other, but it was never their place to ask. As long as Mora and Nora stayed efficient servants to Naruto, there was no problem. 10 minutes later, and the large, flying vehicle took off back to Sukai Kingdom. The hunters returned back to rounding up Kumo shinobi in the outposts bordering Kumogakure. Much to the displeasure of the twins, they had to split up to perform their functions, while the inventors chose to go back into Kumo to meet up with the others, with Nirvana wanting to meet up with her lord. The next place they were to hit was to take over the whole of Lightning Country before they proceeded to either Spring Country or Hidden Mist. Naruto was leaning more to Spring because he wanted to save the challenge of Mist for later. "This is Nirvana Kurigoku. Patch me over to Shinokora, maid of King Naruto," the different-colored hair girl said as she and her inventors hopped from tree to tree with random gusts of wind from the propellers on their legs. "Patching you over, please wait," was the reply, and a second later there was a low buzz in her ear. "Yes, Nirvana?" came the sweet voice of the soul of the Kyuubi, staring in awe at her master as he floated back into the office. "We have captured the two tails and the eight tails holders and have sent them back to Sukai Kingdom." There was a low shuffling sound on the other end as Shinokora handed her earpiece to Naruto, who motioned for her to hand it over. The Rinnegan holder placed it in his ears and spoke to the inventor. Naruto speaking. "And my lord." She almost stumbled as her subordinates, who had been eavesdropping, also almost fell from the air in surprise. "Excellent job taking care of the 2 and 8 tails Jinchuriki. I want you to return back here as soon as possible," he said, and the girl squealed in happiness. "Right away, sir." And he closed the link. All the way back in Kumo, with Naruto the king of Sukai Kingdom, he pressed the earpiece and said, "Patch me over to Indra Watashi, head of Frontline Soldiers Division, and Satoshi Todoroki, head of Rescue and Support Division." Yes, sir." The lady on the other end stammered and connected Naruto to the two heads. "Indra here, Lord Naruto." "Satoshi here, my Lord Naruto," came the two replies as the transponder hurriedly informed them who was on the line. "You two are in charge of mobilizing your soldiers on taking over Lightning Country. My spies at the capital are ready and they will begin acting accordingly when the capital is invaded. Do not waste all of your soldiers, I have seen here that would be too excessive, and do not make other countries aware of what is happening. You know how best to deal with them. When you're done with Lightning Country, station your forces around Water Country, keep them hidden and wait until I arrive." "Yes, sir," they said in unison, and Naruto cut the call. The teenage king sat down on the dead Kage's chair and placed his feet on the table in a lax backward lean. He was in deep thought, trying to decide whether or not to wait for Lightning Country to come under his rulership or to move ahead with invading Spring Country. Maybe their famed chakra armor could pose more of a challenge for his soldiers. A full frontal attack, that sounded about right. Let his soldiers have their fun, he thought with a sinister smirk to the kneeling high-rank soldiers before him. The next day. Spring country was beautiful this time of the season. The air was calm and serene, blowing through the landscape that was filled with lush grass and flourishing trees. Naruto had heard that a group of Konoha ninjas had helped liberate the country from the tyrannical rule of Doton, the uncle to the present leader of the country, Koyuki Kazuhana. Before it was a wasteland of snow and ice, cold and barren of any kind of warmth, or feeling of belonging to both the occupants and the visiting Konoha ninjas. Quite frankly, Spring Country reminded him of his floating home, Sukai Kingdom, but on a much, much smaller scale and a bit less developed. Even though there was an abundance of precious resources constantly growing in the earth of Sukai, and that he and the people capitalized on this by building all manner of buildings and mechanical breakthroughs, there was still acres and acres of fresh land that was populated by nothing but nature. Animals lived in peace, since the Wildlife Conservation Department of his civilian division ensured no harm came to the slice of nature that was in their protection. These thoughts made Naruto not want to harm the beauty of the country. Pain teaches us who we are. Those words echoed in the king of Sukai's mind. That was the first lesson Orochimaru taught him, without actually saying it, when the redhead was just 3 years old. You can't really live until you die a little. The tall Rinnegan holder stepped out of the royal vehicle as it stopped in the middle of a gravel road leading towards the capital of country. He waited patiently for the ninja he had asked to accompany come down as well before he began his walk, his iron boots stomping with each step and crushing any stone under his feet. He didn't put on his royal helmet signifying his position, even though he didn't really need it for his troops to know him, because he was sure he wouldn't need it. Nirvana Kurigoku was a usually outgoing 19-year-old girl, always smiling and laughing and even muttering to herself in the presence of others, creating the image that she was a mad inventor. This image was coupled with her multicolored hair and the chirpy way she spoke. She liked that image. It made her feel like she had an identity among the soldiers of the Sukai army. It made her stand out because, during her time in Sound, a slave to the pleasures of Kabuto, she had just been a blurry blob in the presence of other blurry blobs. Now that she had gotten the attention of her lord, the godlike person she had wholeheartedly come to call her master, she stood out among the masses. This happy-go-lucky girl did not skip in joy behind her master but rather shuffled her iron-booted feet as she timidly looked down with her hands behind her back. A legion of over 1,000 soldiers marched behind them, not even trying to hide their presence. Sir? The head inventor spoke and Naruto briefly looked over his shoulder and raised an eyebrow to acknowledge that he had heard her before returning his eyes to the capital he was about to invade. Pardon me, but if I may be so curious as to ask why you wanted me to accompany you here. Her head shot up after she had heard the words that had just come out of her mouth, like she had said the most vile and most evil words in all of creation. Not that it is not an honor to follow you, my lord Naruto. I am merely inquisitive because it is usually Shinokura that escorts you. She clenched her eyes shut in fear but opened them when she heard a small snort, a sigh that meant Naruto was not offended. He motioned for her to walk beside him, and he pointed at the great capital with his black armored fingers as he placed his other hand on her right shoulder. Tell me, Nirvana, what makes Spring Country stand out on this continent of legends? The girl's mind was hazy as Naruto kept his hand on her shoulder, but she barely stuttered out her reply. Their chakra armor, my lord. Correct. You are the best person I know that can fully analyze their armor and find a chink in it. You see, you are just as important here as you are holed up in your lab all day. He patted her shoulder then dropped his hand, not wanting the adoring girl to pass out on him. I had Shinokura stay back to supervise the takeover of the Lightning Country capital. The other two heads can look over how to best command the country by themselves. She will meet me after I subdue Spring. It is well known that when the capital of a country fell, then the whole country followed suit. Admittedly, there will be a little resistance from other parts of the country, but not as great as the capital. I am humbled by your thoughts of me, my lord. Think nothing of it. They could already hear the alarms of the capital blaring as they saw the sea of humanity, led by one single figure, marching towards them. Naruto's expectations of the shinobi had gone down after his invasion of Kumo, so he didn't think much of it before he lifted his right hand to the sky, ordering his soldiers to stop and waited patiently for an incoming envoy of Spring Shinobi, numbering in the hundreds. You will speak for me, he said, and she placed her right hand over her heart as she bowed. He couldn't wait for all of Lightning Country and its resources to come under his power. He trusted his 2 division heads to act in his stead. If the country posed a problem, all he had to do was say the word and dozens of trucks from the Inventor's division would rain down bombs on the country, and the Fuinjutsu division would ensure people stayed within the boundaries of the country. His soldiers didn't just die for him, they lived for him. They breathed for him. Naruto was not in the mood for having his people fight for dominance for extended periods of time. If the place posed too much of a hassle, then he would simply wipe it off the face of the earth. His plans for world destruction was still there, maybe after he had gotten his fill of entertainment, but for now he was going for world domination. After the events of Sound, Naruto would admit that he had lost his soul, primarily because his sister had died in his presence, but also with the terrible, chakra network changing and body augmenting experiments they conducted on him. He was what they made him to be, a partly emotionless human that sought out enjoyment in the destruction of lives, livelihood, and property. And he led an army of people that would do anything for him. War was not something he ran away from. He caused the wars, he fought in the wars, and he will stand over the dead bodies of those that dared defy him. And not that he would have to lift a finger. His soldiers would do the fighting themselves, and when Naruto felt like it, he would step down from his throne to show the world how powerful he was. Like now, he didn't need to fight, but he wanted to, not because he needed to have the blood on his hands, but to see if years of developing his kingdom had dulled his abilities. He still remembered asking his dead godfather if he was ready to destroy the world, and his answer was yes. He was ready to destroy the world. But not yet. There was still an abundance of entertainment he could squeeze out of them, and by them he meant those that lived on the continent, not his soldiers or his people, before he could drop a bomb on the planet and move into space with his kingdom, maybe to look for other planets to conquer and destroy. The possibilities were endless. He was what they made them to be. That was the simple fact. Naruto placed his hands behind his lower back, elbows slightly bent, and looked to the armored shinobi stoically. He spared a quick look to the inventor standing by his side protectively, and she nodded with a small smile. Naruto refrained from scoffing. She already had a way of bypassing the armor. He knew he didn't make a mistake by bringing her instead of Shinikora, or any other division head, all of whom were platinum rank. He nodded for Nirvana to walk forward and meet the incoming ninjas. That is close enough. She shouted and held up her palm for them to stop about 25 or so feet away. The shinobi stumbled in confusion, and few even chuckled in amusement at the authoritative yell from the unserious-looking teen. Her hair is wildly multicolored, so yeah. Behind her, Naruto crossed his arms over his chest silently, and allowed his speaker to speak for him. The spring ninjas decided to humor her. State your name and your purpose. My name is Nirvana Kurigoku, Platinum Rank Ninja and head of the Invention Division, and I am the honored speaker for the great king of the Tsukai Kingdom, the almighty sovereign of the sky, the immortal master of the six paths, Lord Naruto. She shouted as she made a flourish motion to Naruto, and the warriors behind Naruto hollered with their fists raised, chanting Naruto's name 4 times before Nirvana ordered for silence with a sharply raised hand. We are here to wrest control of your country in the name of our Lord. The leader of the hundreds of spring soldiers sputtered out a laugh that made the devout follower of the Rinnegan holder feel a vein throb on her forehead. What an idiot. I think it's best for you and your Lord Naruto to turn around and crawl back into your hole. He crossed his arms and smirked cockily, which didn't waver when he didn't get any facial reaction from the king of Tsukai Kingdom, but Nirvana was different. The multicolor-haired girl ground her teeth and her armored fists shook terribly with rage as she roared. You will pay for your insolence. Yeah, sure. Standard formation. The head inventor yelled over her shoulder to the soldiers of Tsukai Kingdom, and they stamped their feet on the ground at once, making the earth tremble under their metal boots, and marched rigidly amongst themselves so that there were 10 rows of soldiers standing behind Naruto. Bronze ranks stood at the front, followed by silver ranks, then gold ranks. The first 3 rows contained the hundreds of inventors and the medics, with the medics stationed behind the inventors and frontliners, and the other 2 rows had the hundreds of frontline warriors their head of division, Indra Watashi, had graciously given Naruto. Their movements and position changes was quick and fluid. Attack positions. The under-armored soldiers drew their weapons, those at the front held swords, sickles and battle fans, and those at the back held arrows and chain javelins irrespective of rank. The humor in the spring shinobi leader died as he saw the strength the red shirt, black trousers and under-armored men and women were resonating. The king of Tsukai Kingdom didn't even move from his cross-armed posture, but he did cock his head to the side and send a small, impressed smirk at the fluid movements he sensed from behind him. Quick, efficient and effective in intimidating their enemies, just like how they were trained. Now hold on. The platinum rank cut him off as she yelled. Frontliners, ready. Inventor, ready. Medics, hold. The tight muscles under surprisingly comfortable and light armor, which was still abnormally tough to scratch, of the soldiers tightened even more when they heard their divisions being called. The frontliners growled, not too happy that their master had been insulted, and the inventors, with their boots expanding as their fan propellers emerged on the soles and their armored hands held up in fighting positions, also enraged that the man they swore their life to had been insulted, prepared like their superior had ordered, while the medics mentally prepared to run in when the order was given. Even though medics were trained in hand-to-hand like every other soldier division, they were not to actually engage in combat unless the situation was dire, and they had to drag a comrade out of the line of fire. The thousands of soldiers stationed behind Naruto suddenly became silent as Naruto lifted off the ground slowly. Nirvana though slammed her fists together, making bright green and blue sparks to fly off her armored fists, and her boots morphed into their propeller forms. She crossed her forearms and sent a large, crazed grin to the spring soldiers through the gap between the back of her hands, and a sharp, buzzing blade of iron and chakra slid out from the back of her wrists, and stopped when they reached 4 feet long. Target the necks. First 7, step forward. The first 7 row of ninjas took a single step forward, separating from the dozens behind them, about 500 in number. Long rangers, ready! The long-range weapons users at the back prepared their weapons. Wait a minute! The leader of the Spring Warriors yelled as he unintentionally took a step away at the image of death the inventor was casting as her shoulder multicolored hair thrashed lightly with the wind and her red and blue eyes darkened. Attack! The Spring soldiers barely got their wits about them when they saw the Sukai forces storm towards them. They ran straight to them and brandishing their weapons they slammed against each other. Nirvana clashed her forearm blades against the katana of the commanding officer. The distraction of watching the fluidity of their motions mesmerized the Spring, which was why they didn't attack initially, coupled with the genjutsu the illusion users of the frontline soldier division were subtly casting in the sidelines. The high-rank, cooperation genjutsu casted by the illusion experts made all her commands seem like it was all in one word. Attack. He could of course merely crush his enemies into paste with a mere thought, but what was the point of finishing a fight that quickly when he had spent 7 long years raising a civilization out of nothing but blood, sweat and dust? What was the point of wars if his Dojutsu gave him an unfair advantage when he has an entire advanced kingdom at his beck and call? Admittedly, his soldiers too had a big unfair advantage over any other soldier on the continent. The Sukai forces, from copper to platinum rank, all went through a rigorous training process that would sooner break a man but not them. They had survived Orochimaru's torture, and this abnormal endurance and resilience was passed down to their children and their children's children. No point in having soldiers if they did not fight for their king. Let them have their fun, was the thought of the Rinnegan king as he hovered over the war zone. Hundreds of rows of Sukai forces waited in attention to be commanded forward, but from what he could see they would have to reserve their strength for the true takedown of Spring. Naruto smiled as he watched his soldiers stomp over their weaker opponents. 30 minutes later. Palace of the Daimyo F. Spring Country. Spring Country capital. Spring Country. Standing at the front door and looking at the inventor head to his side reminded Naruto that a good 95% of the people of Sukai Kingdom were mutants, including him. Nirvana's combat uniform was pristine of blood and gore, but her boots, specifically the soles, were covered in blood. There were shiny red, green and blue scales on her cheeks, and covering her neck as well as her different colored eyes became reptilian. Her mouth was filled with needle-like teeth that would change back to normal once she calmed down, and there was a short lizard tail coming out from her tailbone. She closed her eyes and cooled down her lizard heart as she bowed down on one knee and placed her right hand over her heart before her master. Her reptilian features smoothened over and she returned back to normal. Did you have fun? Naruto asked the 19-year-old mutant as he turned around and looked at the sea of soldiers standing there. At the far back, those that had been injured were being tended to by medics. No one had died in the scuffle. Now there were about 600 Sukai soldiers, while the others that hadn't been injured, about 400 in number, were stomping around the capital and dealing with the other Spring soldiers that had not yielded and making the citizens aware that the country was now going to be under new lordship. The plan was to spread out a few other soldiers to other locations in Spring to better control them. Then all soldiers were to leave, but not without making it very clear that if Spring ever tried to revolt against Naruto, then the entire country will be turned into a bleeding, smoking deep depression in the ground without hesitation. Like all the countries after Sukai was done with them. King Naruto didn't need to have the bulk of his soldiers stay in conquered countries. Just a few would do to constantly remind those countries who their new lord was. Right now, though Naruto had a meeting with the daimyo, Koyuki Kazuhana, he could already feel the men and women behind the door prepare for his arrival by barricading the door and arming themselves to the teeth. Quite frankly, it was funny, but the Rinnegan king allowed them as much time to prepare, which was why he stood at the door and spoke with his loyal to death lizard mutant division head. Yes, my lord, I had a lot of fun, she said and retracted her tail and her teeth, frantically smoothing down her hair as she muttered. I apologize for looking so unsightly, my lord. Naruto waved her worries away. It shows you were fighting with all you have. I fight for you, my king. If I do not fight with all I have, then I am not worthy to serve you, she said. That is good. You, all of you, he said to the gathered soldiers standing rigidly. are what good soldiers are meant to be. You have made me proud today, and I want you to keep making me proud. Sir, yes, sir! They all called and pumped their fists in the air. Inside the palace there was pandemonium. Chairs, tables, even cooking pots were thrown in front of the door to barricade it from Naruto's army. In the middle of the chaos of rushing palace servants and soldiers was the stunned daimyo, Koyuki. You said he can fly? She squeaked as she gawked at the only man to escape the slaughter. In truth, he was the only person Naruto allowed to escape to warn her daimyo. He wanted her to prepare for his arrival. The shivering, bald samurai bobbed his head and looked around, paranoia clear in his eyes. Yes, madam, and his army, he shivered with terror and continued. It is like they do not know pain or fear or even death. It is like they are not even human. Not human? You aren't making any sense. The way they moved, the way they fought, it was like they were all a single entity. They knew where they all were at the same time, and they never once allowed any openings. The only possible way to injure them is to stab oneself to reach them, and even at that their armor is very nearly impenetrable. He grabbed his hair and pulled as he looked at the ground with wide eyes. Then there is that demon that led them, the lizard woman with different colors in her hair. He fell on his knees and cried. The daimyo clenched her jaw and walked past him to her throne. Though she didn't sit on it, she began pacing back and forth. What does this Sukai kingdom want with her recently freed country? From the report the man had given before he fell into hysteria, she didn't know. The Sukai soldiers were a terribly powerful force with weapons, skills, and abilities that far surpassed anything she had ever dreamt of. Then an idea clicked in her head, and she called a servant to her side. The panicking girl tore off her white sleeve and handed her daimyo a brush and a pot of ink from panel at the foot of the throne. She hastily wrote the distress letter to Konoha and tasked the same servant to run as fast as her legs could carry her, with as many valuables she could take for her own well-being, through the tunnel leading outside of Spring and straight to Waterfall, which was still many miles away. It was a secure tunnel. Go. Now! She urged the 13-year-old girl and pushed her throne aside to reveal a stairwell that wound straight down. She ushered her servants to rush inside as well and pulled the throne back in place before the last servant could opt for her to follow as well. A few ninjas and samurai refused to flee and chose to stand by her till the very end, though the traumatized bald warrior fled with the servants. The palace was devoid of sound as Koki sat down on her throne slowly, her heart beating the song of death and despair for her own life, and she waited for the king of Sukai to gain entry, which he undoubtedly will with the kind of reports she had gotten. Her remaining guards stood by the side of her throne, 10 in total, and held their weapons tightly, also nervous to meet the king that led an army that had bested her forces so easily. A minute of waiting later and the items used to barricade the door began shuffling aside by themselves, driving cold chills up the spine of the guards that chose to stay behind, but the spring daimyo lifted up a stubborn chin and watched as more and more items moved from the door. The great door flew open by itself and soldiers in golden under armor marched in, making the sounds of metal on marble thud through the silent palace. The warriors stood at the walls and placed their right hands over their hearts, but kept their eyes on the spring daimyo and her guards. A single warrior, a girl with rainbow-colored hair, stomped in with her hands behind her back after the last golden soldier entered, leaving a small gap for Koyuki and the others to see a sea of gold, silver and bronze under-armored men and women standing outside her castle. They gulped at the sight. The feeling of dread increased when the lone rainbow-haired woman, this one with platinum under-armor, stopped before the open door and slid to the side. She too placed her right hand over her heart and inclined her head a little downwards. The warriors outside the castle watched, transfixed, as their master took his time walking into the spring daimyo's castle. It was obvious that he was the king with the way his mere presence commanded an air of fear and respect in her and her guards. His black with red ringed eyes and the kanji on his red and gold short-sleeved shirt, that Red Sky King, made it even more obvious to the beautiful actress. Naruto had a small, amused smirk on his face as he walked in, his hands behind his back and his head shaking in disappointment. I can't help but be surprised you did that, Madam Kazuhana. Koyuki forced up courage from its drying well inside her and yelled. Who do you think you are to walk onto my land, Zanak? She gasped when an unseen force closed around her throat, making it harder for her to breathe. I am Naruto, the Rinnegan holder said as he took a step forward. A deep thud from his metal boots shook the palace. The head of a guard to her right exploded in a geyser of blood, but not even a drop touched her. The headless man crumped onto his knees. I am the king, he continued, still walking steadily towards the choking woman. Another guard's head exploded to her left, and still no blood touched her. Of the Sukai kingdom. He took a step up the small set of stairs leading up to her throne, and the earth tremors rattling the great palace increased. The spring daimyo's eyes began to water as the desperation for air called to her. A guard's head exploded again, and that was when the others began gearing to attack, but before they could leap at the Rinnegan King they stumbled and fell flat onto their faces, showing the kunai at the sides or back of their heads. The golden armored soldiers stationed at the walls lowered their hands. And you, Naruto said, taking another step up and stopping before the woman, have done exactly what I wanted you to do. He smiled a little and released his gravity hold around her neck when her face turned an ugly shade of gray and her eyes were about to roll up into her head. Naruto looked at her with his still glowing Rinnegan eyes that were much more powerful than they were supposed to be because of his mutated blood and chakra network, and placed a gentle hand on her head. Do you really think that I'm not aware that you have a distress letter en route to Konoha, in the hands of a child running through the hidden tunnel? Under your throne? He asked slowly, the amused tone of his voice making the woman's infuriated but weak against him. The main question that ran through her head was on how he found out about the letter. I can have them killed with the snap of my fingers. He lifted his other hand and rolled his wrist. But I will not do that. Let them know, let everyone know, about the might of my kingdom and let them prepare as much as they want, their defeat is inevitable. His lips lowered to her ear, and she closed her eyes tightly in fear. And you know that, don't you, Madame Kazuhana? I'll give you anything you want. The woman cried, afraid for her life to slap away the hand that was on her head. Just please leave my people alone. I want one thing before I leave your wonderful country, Madame Kazuhana. One very simple thing and life would return back to how it used to be. He gently lifted her gaze from his obsidian black boots to his eyes. You can stay on the throne and your people will live, but I want all of Spring Country to swear fealty to me. If not. His smile widened a little and he closed his eyes. I will shower the blood of your people on you and turn this country into a hole in the ground. And we both know I can do that, don't we? She nodded immediately and tried to lower her eyes, if not she feared her heart would give out with the amount of terror she was feeling. Good. We have an understanding, he said as he patted her cheek, standing back up. He snapped his finger and held his left hand out, palm up and waiting. Nirvana rushed forward, her platinum boot intentionally treading heavily on the marble floor, and placed the scroll onto Naruto's awaiting hand. The king gave the daimyo the scroll and turned around. I will send a squad to pick up that scroll at dawn tomorrow. Whether you sign it or not is up to you, but I know you will do the right thing. For your people. Before he turned around he then added as an afterthought. Oh, he bent on one knee so he could be eye level with her and whispered. And you made the right decision not stabbing me with your blade. He patted her head once and turned around in a flourish, his obsidian boots not making the heavy stomping it had formerly been making. Why kill the Raikage and spare the Spring Daimyo? Naruto had to admit that they both had equal amounts of stubbornness between them. He could see the famous actress about to pull out a blade to stab him when he approached, despite having her throat squeezed tightly, but only stopped her doomed plan after all her guards were killed before they could take the step forward they intended. The Raikage did not hide his attempts to murder Naruto. The reason was that the dead Raikage was too stubborn to die out of natural male pride. He did not want to be bested by a boy many years his junior, but Koiki was stubborn because of the lives she was responsible for, not for any kind of personal pride. The Rinnegan King could see it in their eyes. He could respect her brand of stubbornness. As the king of Tsukai Kingdom left the palace, leaving the solemn daimyo by herself in the middle of dead bodies with only a scroll in her hands, the Tsukai soldiers marched out with him. 10 minutes ago Indra Watashi also handed the lightning daimyo the scroll that detailed the fealty Naruto intended for the world. The head of the frontline soldiers and Satoshi Todoroki, head of the rescue and support division, allowed the man time to think and hopefully, for him, make the right decision. The old, white-haired man had an extended family. Naruto knew that fact very well, so the choice he made was the same as Koiki Kazuhana. They spread the scroll on the ground and signed their names on the dotted line. Nirvana opened the royal vehicle door for her master, and Naruto ducked into it as he said, "You've all done exceptionally well. You may stay here and rest for the time being, but do not cause any trouble." Addressing the legions of soldiers standing outside his car and also to the division head, Nirvana Kurigoku. "Yes, Lord Naruto. I entrust them to you, Nirvana," Naruto said in a low voice to his subordinate, speaking to her from the lowered window. The teen nodded and bowed her head slightly. "When the scroll is signed, you and the others can return back home. Wait there for my command." "Understood, sir." "Oh, and also send for Magi the head of Fuinjutsu. Tell her to wait for me at Water Country." "Yes, sir." The Rinnegan King waved a little and wound up his window, signaling the driver to take off to Kirigakure, where he suspected his previous orders of soldiers be stationed around the village has already been undertaken. His vehicle flickered and camouflaged with the sky as it smoothly sailed to its destination, leaving Naruto to sit at the back and read a short novel. If they took their time, like they were now, they would get to Water Country in roughly 40 minutes. Minor countries like Frigid Country, which was further up north than Spring Country, could be dealt with later. Their threat level wasn't that high to begin with. After Water Country, then Naruto would be more comfortable spreading out his forces to take over countries 2 or 3 at a time. He had more than enough soldiers for that, and the technology they used increased the kingdom's chances of succeeding. Everything is going perfectly. Amigakure no Sato. How many tailed beasts do we have now? A male voice asked from a dark hallway to the other person walking with him. You don't keep count? I'm positive you're present when we seal them. A deep voice answered. Another male. I wasn't around for a while, remember? Master regularly sends me to check up on his younger brother. We currently have 4 tailed beasts. Itachi and Kisame have said that the 2 and 8 tails have vanished, but Hamato Toshi updated me that they were in the kingdom. The taller of the 2 said in a low voice. He was referring to head of the intelligence and interrogation division. Impressive. Did he say anything else? That Lord Naruto has begun his plans for global domination. That is fantastic news, the man said in a low voice. No doubt our other comrade in the Akatsuki would be glad to hear it as well, he said, referring to the other mole in the S-rank organization. Division head, you will tell us when it is time to make our true allegiances known, the speaker said as his eyes shone with expectations. He then chose to turn the conversation away in case others heard them. How is Master's younger brother? At the moment he is still recuperating in Konoha from his battle with Sasuke Uchiha, Itachi's younger brother. 2 Kidoras to the chest and dislocated collarbone. Just yesterday Sasuke had attempted to defect from the village in order to find and kill Itachi. It had failed and now he was under house arrest for the next year. I pity Sasuke, was what the other man said after a long pause. They separated. The second man, the one reporting about the welfare of Naruto's younger brother, kept walking until he encountered his partner, and the first speaker, who had been informing the other of the number of tailed beasts in their grasp, turned into the Amikage's office. Hey bro? A voice whispered beside him. Yeah? A 5-year-old Naruto turned to his red-haired sister and shuffled closer to her, if that was even possible seeing as they shared the same tiny cage among the bigger, but still considerably small, cages in the underground slave containment room in Hidden Sound. Naruto rested her head on her brother's shoulder and intertwined her right hand with his left as their other hands wound around their sides. What are you gonna do first when we get out? She asked in a low, tired voice. They had just returned from their usual morning round of chakra virus infection and cure, and they were exhausted from all their screaming. The purple-eyed male child smiled wanly at his precious sister. A sharp pain shot through his heart at the sleepy smile she gave him. When we get out? He coughed upwards so he wouldn't do it in her face. Yeah, when we get out. I'm going to have an ice cream. The older male child stifled his giggle at the sheer innocence his younger twin sister still managed to have, even after all the horrors she had been put through. A ray of sunshine on the dark days their lives had suddenly become. She tightened the fingers clasping his own and hid her face in his neck when a sound shinobi passed them, but disregarded the twins and dragged out a sick mother from her child's arms. Naruto sighed and closed his eyes at the sight. Well? His sister prodded, and Naruto placed a gentle kiss on the top of her head when he felt her body weaken from lack of sleep. I'm gonna, he said as he felt sleep wash over him as well. The twins yawned in sync and also smacked their dry lips for water they knew would never come unless their heads were dunked into a bucket of filthy water. I'm gonna, his slowly churning mind tried to think of what he will do when he got out if he got out. I'm gonna eat ice cream with you, he said to her, and she smiled. The connection they had could almost be said to be supernatural. This was evident when they both finished what they were both thinking. Sitting on father's dead body, they said as one, and sleep overtook them. Naruto's black with red ringed Rinnegan eyes snapped open when he heard a polite cough from his driver. We're here, my lord. The king stretched like a cat on his comfortable seat, long and spacious enough for him to lie down comfortably and take a quick nap before he got to Water Country. A 10-minute nap would have to do for now. Naruto sat up and swung his feet onto the floor of the car, straightening his red and gold royal shirt with hazy eyes. Thank you, he said to the driver and ran his right hand through his shaggy hair, just as the door of the car was opened by Indra Watashi, his head of Frontline Soldiers Division. I hope you had a pleasant journey here, sir, the holder of the Kubikiri said with his dark eyes lowered and his right hand over his heart. His other hand was holding his king's door open. Naruto took a step out, and the thousands of soldiers stationed around Water Country that had gathered in formation at his arrival snapped into attention and then fell onto one knee before their lord. They had been stationed around the country, but at his arrival about 60% were ordered to be present to welcome him, while the others begrudgingly stayed where they were, miffed that they could not go and welcome their lord. It was fine, thank you, Indra. The king of Sukai Kingdom replied to the platinum rank soldier. His eyes moved around and stopped at the two more platinum ranks with Indra, the head of the frontline soldiers division, Satoshi Todoroki, head of rescue and support, and Magi Harai Gamatomo, head of Fuinjutsu. The other man and the youngest platinum rank had their heads tilted down and their right hands over their hearts. I see you got the message to come, Magi. The mint-haired girl bowed deeper and slightly shook at being acknowledged by her king. I am happy to have been called by you, my king, she said. One of the Rinnegan's abilities, the usual Rinnegan's abilities, was to take the soul of a target, like he did with Orochimaru, but that was not the end of it. He could also take the memories of the victim from the soul. This not only gave him the biggest possible cheat code to increase his jutsu list and his intellectual advantage over most people, taking into account that Orochimaru had an expansive knowledge of all things, but also allowed him access to who exactly the former slaves were or where they were from. Take, for instance, he knew of the deep mutant abilities of those in his army, caused by the experiments, and the history of the former slaves. Magi Harai Gamatomo was formerly from Kirigakure, born into a merchant clan that was closely tied with the Toad summoning clan but with none of the Toad-like capabilities. The Gamatomo clan had been a clan that traded in oil, but when the Bloody Mist War erupted due to the madness of the Mizukage, they had been slaughtered, but Magi had been hidden in the bushes by her parents, who ran in the other direction to draw the attention of the Kiri ninja away from their baby daughter. Kabuto had picked her out of the bush when the dust had settled and took her to his master. The vile experiments done on the girl and the constant reminder that she was the last of her clan, that even if she escaped she would have nowhere to go, broke her resolve and any self-confidence she had. Magi had been a very hard person Naruto had helped, not because she was not talented. The girl was a Fuinjutsu prodigy, so much so most times it seemed that she was born holding a brush and a paper pad, though unlikely. It was that she always berated herself for the smallest of mistakes. The teen she had sworn her life to, the person she ultimately wanted to be like in every way, took it upon himself to boost her confidence so that it wouldn't end up killing her in the battlefield. It was among the people Naruto chose to pay close attention to and to help, mainly those that were now his division heads and his gold and silver rank soldiers. The girl straightened up from her bow and held the arms of her bright green backpack with depictions of unicorns and rainbows dancing on it. The king nodded to her and faced his other subordinate, the platinum rank head of rescue and support, Satoshi Todoroki. The moisture in the air did not dampen the man's frizzy blonde hair. Your forces are ready to fight for you, King Naruto, he said in a deep, calm voice. That's good. How many are here? 3,000, sir, Indra replied as he closed the door. He ensured to listen to Naruto's command of not going overboard with soldiers because, against what they thought and expected from the shinobi, they were surprisingly weak. Naruto had roughly 46,000 soldiers currently, the numbers were still growing. It was merely a tiny slice of his forces that had been brought. Naruto hummed as he felt Shinikora's presence behind him. He opened his arms and allowed the woman to put on a deep red overcoat over his body, long enough to reach his ankles. He raised his left hand for the maid and the soul of the Kyuubi stood back, allowing her master to fasten on the 4 buttons himself. The king rolled his shoulders and clinked his iron-armored fingers against each other, nodding to himself when it didn't reduce his movements. I want you to take 2,000 of them to the capital of this country, while I take the rest. The platinum ranks and combat maid of the king exchanged worried looks. Are you sure, my lord? Indra asked. I'm sure. These ninjas haven't proved their threat level to me yet, so I will not take them seriously. I'm sure that even 500 of my forces can take down the capital with little problem. I too am sure about that, my king, Satoshi said, and the others nodded in agreement. Keep 1,000 of those soldiers on standby while the others actively participate. If the water daimyo is stubborn and keeps sending ninjas, then make sure he is humbled and shown who the true master is. Of course, sir. Magi, you will be coming with me, Naruto said and briskly began walking into the country, past the border with a flourished movement and lightly flapping of the tails of his coat. The green backpack-wearing prodigy rushed to him with Shinikora. The 2 male platinum soldiers began ordering for 1,000 warriors, with a good distribution of gold, silver, bronze, and copper soldiers. But sir. Wouldn't Indra or Satoshi be better to accompany you? The fact that he was back home didn't faze her anymore. She was stronger than she was back then, and she knew that fact very well. It was her lack of self-confidence surfacing that made her doubt her ability to protect her master. You will be fine, Naruto said in a slightly reassuring voice as he patted her shoulder once. Your particular skill set will be an advantage for us in Kiri. He glanced over his shoulder to the silently following maid. You would speak for me if I do not want to. The red-haired woman nodded. The Sukai forces marched on behind their king, ensuring not to make too much of a loud stomping sound, even as the mist began to set in as they finally reached Kiri, after a long hour of marching. Magi took in a deep breath and tapped her right ear, where a single white earbud sat, and said to each soldier behind her, "Buddy system seal." They muttered their replies and held up the snake hand seal as the Fuinjutsu prodigy flipped through a dozen hand seals before ending it by lacing her fingers together and whispering, "Buddy system seal, activate." The different metal hands of the soldiers began glowing gold, though they didn't stop marching, and there was a quick flash of red that flew from the Fuinjutsu prodigy's fingers to Naruto and Shinokora before it flashed and jumped from one soldier to the other, always leaving the golden hands red after it had left, until all their hands turned bright red. The jumping string of light disappeared as it got to the last soldier, an older gold rank soldier, before all dropped their hands back to their sides. All of their right eyes blinked red as their hands went down before returning back to their normal colors, signifying that the buddy system seal was now active. This seal allowed each soldier to have a deep knowledge of where the other was by a sort of projection of light only they could see. Even as the mist thickened enough to block sight for more than a centimeter before them, the mental seal light cut through it and shone on their comrades, coupled with the light from others, and the army could see well enough as well as a few feet before them. They had been trained to fight as a unit when the occasion demanded it, and as long as they knew where the other was they would know what to do. Activate sensory seals? The seal master whispered into her earbud, and as one the Sukai soldiers tapped the back of their right wrists with their right hands, and then they were able to sense for a 4-foot radius around them. But with the comrades around them, this sensory ability was boosted to allow each soldier to sense for a mile or two around them. Naruto smirked a little at the display, and the sensory seal allowed the seal master to know when her master nodded to her in gratitude. The girl blushed and bowed in appreciation. The Rinnegan was not able to see through mist or smoke bombs, no matter how overpowered his eyes made him, leaving him with nothing but his natural sensory abilities and the trust that his soldiers had his back. They kept trudging in silence until Magi abruptly said into her earbud, "Trap ahead, 20 feet from me." 10 silver and 5 gold ranked members of the frontline soldier division that specialized in traps rushed by and disappeared in the mist. 5 seconds later. Trap disabled. Scout out for more and report back with each one you find. Understood, ma'am. One of the trap specialists replied, and the 5 soldiers surged forward, their metal-armored feet not even making a single sound as they moved and their armor as silent as the night. 10 more feet and they stopped before a pit covered in grass and soil, under which was a bed of wooden spikes. The same trap specialist said, "Trap found. Disabled." As another member of his team flashed through seals and covered up the pit with earth, making sure it was perfectly covered before they continued forward. They kept going, and his buddy system seal allowed him to see 2 silver ranks quickly burning down a tree where a snare trap was hidden. Trap found and disabled. A gold rank dismantled 7 Saban launchers hidden in the ground and also cut the trip wire. Trap found and disabled. Another gold rank poured deep red fire into a pit of scorpions and covered their melting bodies with earth. Trap found and disabled. The gold-ranked captain of the squad bent down on one knee and ripped off a Fuinjutsu seal tag on the ground that would activate when stepped on. It crumbled into dust in his hand. Trap found and disabled. "That's enough, come back," Magi said, and the trap specialists returned back to their positions in the marching group of soldiers. "We have arrived in Kirigakure, my lord." Naruto nodded wordlessly with his eyebrows somewhat furrowed in thought. These sort of commands were taught in the Sukai Soldier Training Academy back in the kingdom, so he wasn't too surprised that she knew the right command for the right situation. Multiple chakra signatures approaching. 40 Kiri ninjas. For his relative blindness, Naruto could merely force away the mist with a well-placed almighty push, but what fun would that be when he could see his forces in action with his buddy system seal? The king did not have any intention of being kind enough to speak with the ninjas, so he nodded for Magi to continue as he put his hands into his overcoat pockets. "Frontline and support teams 25 to 50, go and deal with them." There was a low whooshing sound as those in the call teams took to the sky in small gusts of wind with the flight seals and landed directly on top of the incoming ninjas. Each one wielded a weapon and brought it down without remorse onto the shocked ninjas. A few managed to dodge the initial aerial attack but were quickly overwhelmed by the number of under-armored soldiers and their single-mindedness. Blood soaked into the ground and dirted their metal boots as the leader of the first squad reported back. "Subdued. Come back." "Roger." The mist lightened as they approached the gate of the village hidden in the mist, just as the soldiers that went out to kill the shinobi returned on foot, but not before clearing away the dead bodies of their victim from the path of their king, even going as far as using earth jutsus to cover up the blood spilled on the ground. The head of the Fuinjutsu division wanted the path to Kiri to be clear of any obstacles. She knew that an impending battle was going to ensue if the Kage disagreed to bow to Naruto, but she wanted her master to have peace for as long as possible before that could happen. Shinokora, who felt left out of the action, said into her earbud, "Nod head peace. I'll take out the gatekeepers." "Go for it." Magi replied without looking back and felt her mint green hair thrash as the combat maid surged forward with her head lowered and her arms flying behind her. Naruto kept track of her chakra signature, even as the woman super suppressed it, and knew that the maid had her claws unsheathed. Shinokora thrust her right hand forward and a silver sword that was split into 7 pieces from tip to hitless base and connected to a chain flew out from her sleeve, and sheathed itself in the throat of a gatekeeper. She yanked the weapon back when the second gatekeeper became alarmed, switched with the dead body of the person she had just killed and thrust her pointer and middle finger into the base of the skull of the second gatekeeper, instantly killing her before she could yell. The maid shook her right arm and the chain slithered back in, easing the unusual sword in as well in on fluid movement. 2 gold ranks opened the gate, and Naruto walked with his hands in his pockets into Kiri. Spread out and contain the shinobi. Magi muttered into her earbud. The Tsukai soldiers separated into their teams, and these teams, containing 5 silver ranks and 1 gold rank, joined other teams to make 10 combined teams, which went their way to hold down the village while Naruto proceeded to the Mizuki's tower with Magi and Shinokora. It has been 3 years now since the bloody Mist Civil War in Kirigakure no Sato, and the village was still trying to get back to its feet. So far it had declined new alliances but had been calling up its former allies in Kumo and Iwa to aid them, but so far only Kumo had sent over money and other resources to help the village. Despite this, Kiri still had powerful ninjas that the war had not managed to kill. The mist was very thin in the village, but even at this the shinobi were still able to creep around without being easily detected. Though this could only be a major disadvantage to other people, not for the Tsukai forces Naruto commanded. The memories of Orochimaru allowed him into the hidden secrets of the village the snake Sannin had been able to find, and in turn Naruto documented these secrets, and gave them to the academy to learn from. The Rinnegan king caught sight of 3 Tsukai soldiers running up the walls and intercepting a Kiri ninja before he could attack their king. 2 more blocked off his right and another 2 blocked his left before the ninja was swiftly killed. The soldiers converged and went back to forcing the village onto its knees. It was impressive because all that could be heard was quiet flapping of clothes and gasps of surprise as shinobi were picked off. The civilians were still none the wiser, but they did give Naruto strange looks as he walked down to the Mizuki's tower between 2 females, who diligently created a path for him. Then the alarms sounded and everyone ran back to their homes, emptying the streets. Naruto stopped abruptly and kept his hands in his coat pockets as he waited for the Mizuki. "You sure do have a pair, kid," Mei Terumi said as she waltzed out from inside a cafe, her eyes narrowed but not glaring at the holder of the Rinnegan. Ao and Chujiro joined in behind her and glowered at the calm confidence of the leader of the attacking force. "May I kill her, my lord?" Magi asked as her right hand reached over her shoulder and pulled out a trench knife from her backpack. Naruto snorted and waved at her to calm down. The 15-year-old girl's killer intent was going out of control. "Hold on," he said to her. Then speaking out loud to the Mizuki and her guards. "My name is—" "I don't give a flying fuck what your name is," the woman yelled. "Killing my shinobi has already sentenced you to death. I merely wanted to make a point. If I didn't, then you won't believe my claims." This got the infuriated Kage intrigued. "Claims?" "Yes, claims. Like that my army is far superior to yours, like your village is not even on my danger radar, like I would order for Kiri to be destroyed if I don't get any compliance." "Enough," the woman said and cracked her knuckles as she nodded to the 2 at her side. "Deal with those 2. They nodded and rushed to Shinokora and Magi. Naruto didn't move an inch, but rather the 2 females at his side rushed in opposite directions, drawing Ao and Chujiro's attention away from Naruto. "Get ready to meet your maker, brat." "We'll see about that," Naruto replied with a small smile and a twinkle in his Rinnegan eyes. As Mei charged at him, the Rinnegan king decided not to make use of his ultimate gravity control to win the match easily. It had been a long time since he had used hand-to-hand, might as well brush up on it. The long brown-haired woman flashed up in front of the Rinnegan holder, and her molten red right fist surged towards his face in a right hook, an inch away before it could burn off his face, and the boy shifted aside by cocking his head away from the blow. He shuffled to his right when a knee came up to break his left arm and lifted his left foot as a fiery sweep came at him. He turned his body completely to as her palms shot forward, missing his chest by a few small inches, and strangely enough his shirt didn't burn up despite the waves of heat pouring off her. All the while Naruto kept his hands in his coat pockets and his posture straight. His Rinnegan flashed, and he dodged a quick sequence of kicks to neck and took a single step away from the Kage when her left fist flew forward to bash his head in. "Stand still, brat," she spat venomously as a right elbow was again avoided by the red head with strange eyes. After her last attempt she flew through 5 hand seals, held up a half-ram hand seal to her chin, took in a deep breath and said, "Lava release, blooming fire flower," and released all the built-up lava in her mouth, washing it on Naruto, who raised an eyebrow before it covered him. As lava dripped off his standing statue, she cut off the lava from her mouth and began another set of seals. Wind release, killer frost bite. This time the wind she blasted from her lips super cooled down the lava and solidified it. Without missing a beat, the last Tsurumi cocked her right fist back and leaped forward, breaking the ground up and sending a shockwave as her sandaled foot left the ground. The Mizukage roared and let her tense arm fly forward and punch the statue of the Rinnegan holder. The air shattered as her fist whistled through it. Thud. Boom! The gray statue cracked once, a small chip on the forehead, before it exploded. The woman stood back and smirked proudly, buffing her nails on her chest and admiring the sight before her. The statue was missing its whole upper body and there was a circle of fire around the base. She was brought down from her high when she discovered that there wasn't a lower body in the statue, just emptiness. Ah, that must be the famous lava release Kekai Genkai. Naruto commented from behind her, not more than 2 feet away. The woman's eyes widened and she whirled around, leaping away at how close he was. The king continued speaking. I heard you were the last of your clan. How are you still alive? The woman asked hesitantly as she lifted up her fist in a shaky fighting stance, both curious and afraid to hear his response. Simple, really, Naruto said with a smile, closing his eyes in glee. I moved. He moved? That fast? I need to end this quickly before he pulls out any more tricks. Sadly for her, it was too late. My servants are almost done dealing with your subordinates, so I'd best finish up with you. It would be a shame if they thought I was having trouble. He could crush her head with the weight of gravity. He could forcefully pull her closer and suck out her soul. He could summon an animal that could rip her to shreds, but he wouldn't do that. The Rinnegan king pulled his hands out of his pockets and lifted them both to her, beckoning her to come. This time try coming at me with all you have. How did he know I was holding back? She shook the thought off and flickered to him, thrusting her palm to his chin, though Naruto swiped the attack aside, dragged her right leg to his right with his right heel, roughly grabbed her neck in his right hand and brought her down onto the ground into an earth-shaking choke slam so hard that the ground beneath her broke up and formed a shallow depression. In quarter of a second after she had arrived, the Mizukage realized she was on the ground. The force of the great attack hit her like a stampede of bulls and blood exploded out of her mouth and nose. Naruto straightened up in one smooth motion and pointed his right fist to her face. Her swirling eyes didn't catch it on time, but she most definitely felt the next attack. Naruto's arm from his tightly clenched fist to his elbow blasted out, disconnecting from the socket, and bashed her on the face, making the crater she was in deeper. Her hazy brain didn't know she was in it until Naruto commanded his arm back and blasted it back onto her face again, all with a tiny smile on his pale face. He repeated this Rinnegan ability, coming from the Azura path his eyes allowed him to access, like with all the other paths, 3 more times, breaking the weakening woman's nose and concussing her with each punch, until his rocket-powered fist flew down to her face but with the hand open, grabbing onto her neck and pulling her back. Naruto lifted the woman off the ground and tightened his fist, closing off air from entering her body. The wind considerably picked up, making his coat flap around erratically as his black with red ringed eyes quickly looked over her body. He scoffed when he saw her about to perform a sealless jutsu. He closed his left hand, leaving only his pointer and middle finger out, and his fingers blazed over her wearily struggling body. A tap on her shoulders, a tap on her elbows, a tap on her wrists, a tap on her thighs and a tap on her forehead, closing up her chakra and leaving them just a bit open to keep her alive. May gasped out blood, making a river of blood flow from her mouth and nose, chalking it onto the armored hand holding her off from the ground. My chakra, she whispered. All closed, Naruto said as he dropped her limp body onto the ground. The Tsurumi tried to will her body to move, but it remained out of her control, as immobile as a dead body. It was like an out-of-body experience for her. She could see how much she tried to move from her facial expression, but she also knew what it felt like because she was currently experiencing it. Why am I still alive? Because I want you alive, Naruto said and squatted down by her side. His coat rustled at the movement. I want to see the moment you realize you cannot defeat me. His voice sounded pleased, but he barely restrained himself to a trembling smile, which increased at the glare she sent him. 2 heavy thuds sounded beside her, and she swiveled her neck, the only part of her body she could move, and her eyes widened when she saw a badly beaten and bruised Ao and a possibly dead Chujiro, his weapon sheathed in his stomach and still glowing with his chakra. She looked back to the Rinnegan king and Naruto had a small grin waiting. And there it is. Defeat. Shinikora stood over his shoulder, wiping off Chujiro's blood from her hands with a white handkerchief and Magi rubbing her sore knuckles, still clenching her trench knife in her left hand. Are you happy now? You've won. The Mizukage spat, disgusted at her own words and at how easily she had been defeated. It was like when she was still a little girl learning from her teacher. Yes, I am quite happy, was Naruto's slick response, and even adding a nod. The Tsukai soldiers had finished rounding up the Kiri ninjas and had them on their knees in the center of the village. The civilians were also there, but in a separate group than the shinobi. Naruto waved over his shoulder and Magi bowed curtly before she went to inspect the king's soldiers. What now? You're going to rape me? Her eyes flicked to Shinikora. In front of her? I bet you'd get your kicks from that sort of thing. Naruto chuckled and shook his head in amusement as he casually ordered Shinikora to stand down. If I wanted sex, I can have it with anyone at any time, but I choose to restrict my choices to those that are willing within my kingdom. Who were considerably many, he admitted with a mental sigh, his mood momentarily cast down by how enthusiastic people were to jump into his bed when he asked them, like they wanted to be in a harem. And the author slowly looks to the reader with a deadpan expression. No, I want a signed agreement that Kiri and by extension Water Country is a subordinate to the Tsukai Kingdom and will also pay regular tribute to my kingdom. He motioned to her guards. This was all to show you what we can do. A sort of clue to what will happen if you do not agree to my terms. Clue? To put it bluntly, I will make Kiri a distant memory if you decline. Hundreds of lives are counting on you now. He got onto his feet and turned away from the immobilized Mizukage as his ear vibrated. Division Head Indra calling, sir. One of the people in the Intelligence and Interrogation Division said into his ear. Yes? The Water Daimyo has signed your fealty deal scroll, my lord. The head of frontline soldiers said in a low voice as he watched, intrigued, as blood got absorbed into his kubikiribiku. The cracks that had been on the sword after he had been using it to cut through dozens of ninjas began sealing up. Good. Send all the soldiers, even the ones still in Kumo and Spring, back to the kingdom. Tell the civilian division's head to begin preparations for a week-long festival starting tomorrow to celebrate our outstanding victory. Everyone is invited. His lips twitched upwards when he heard Satoshi whoop in the background. The carefree head of the Rescue and Support Division always liked the kingdom's festivals. He no doubt knew that the division head was spreading the good news to the troops, and they were all getting excited. He chuckled when he heard Indra hiss for silence. Thank you, my lord. Think nothing of it, you all deserve to celebrate. Naruto out. He cut the connection and spoke into his earbud. Patch me over to Division Head Magi. Patching you over, sir? He heard the person's voice tremble with excitement. A moment later. Yes, my king? He heard the feeble whisper of the head of Fuinjutsu say. It was like the girl had a personality that came out when she commanded the troops and another one when he directly addressed her. Have all the soldiers sent back home. We are going to celebrate. Excellent news, sir. I will contact Division Head Nora of the Scout and Retrieval to come and pick us up. She doesn't have to personally come, she just has to send a few retrieval vehicles. I'm sure Division Head Nora would be more than happy to come herself with the vehicles, my lord. Fine then. Tell all the division heads that we will have a meeting as soon as I get back home to formally report our discoveries. Yes, sir. Naruto disconnected and turned back to the immobile Mizukage. So what will it be? Life or death? The woman slowly turned her head to him, formerly looking at Chujiro with worry. The boy was breathing very shallowly, and if his wounds weren't treated, and the sword wasn't removed from his stomach, then the boy would die. She sighed and closed her eyes in resignation. Life. Good choice. Shinikora dropped the fealty agreement scroll beside her head. Copies of the scroll were meant to be jointly signed by both the daimyo. I will have a squad return to pick it up, but if you attack them, then I will consider it null and void. His Rinnegan flickered and the blade sheath in the young man's stomach was pulled out. Fix him up, he said over his shoulder to his personal maid. He saw the potential for entertainment in Chujiro. Fighting tournaments and other life or death situations he would throw at him. Your major chakra points would open up in an hour if you don't try to force them open. Make sure you read the scroll in detail. I really hope you don't try and rebel against me. It would be a shame to kill off the last of a clan so soon. He left the woman lying there and entered into the royal vehicle as it drove in from the sky, though not before taking off his coat and handing it over to Shinikora. The other soldiers, save a few that wanted to ensure their king leave safely, remained and waved at him as he entered. Nora, the head of Scout and Retrieval, bowed to him with magi. King Naruto is just so wow, the black-masked woman said with a wistful sigh, watching as the royal vehicle left with a few other retrieval vehicles flanking it in the sky. Magi joined the older ninja and breathed out. I know. He's so cool. She squealed in a low voice, and the taller, older female threw her arm over the seal master's shoulder and walked into the back of a retrieval vehicle, Shinekora joined in a second later after ensuring that Chujiro wasn't going to bleed to death. It makes me glad I was privileged to serve him, Shinekora commented as she watched the last of the Sukai soldiers sit down on the seats at the back of the truck. About 80 seats and 60 were filled up, the others that had already gone were at maximum capacity. The seats were black, red and gold in color with seat belts that each soldier strapped over their bodies as the trucks slowly lifted off the ground. The soul of the fox then leaned to the other two females to her right and whispered, "Did you know that conquering these 3 countries was just a test to see if our army was capable of taking over the world? He tested us in all situations, stealth in lightning country, full frontal in spring country, and individual and group strength here in water country." Magi scratched her chin. "I suspected so. He didn't think we were capable?" It was Nora that replied. "Of course he did, our master has the utmost confidence in our abilities. His other intention for invading those 3 countries was also to send a message to the other countries. The Sukai kingdom is here and we are dominant." She yelled and the soldiers with her yelled with her. "Yeah." The masked woman laughed and leaned back. Shinekora beamed at the two and settled back into her seat, clasping the seat belt holding her in place as the trucks smoothly moved upwards towards their home. "Believe me when I say this, girls, our king believes in us all." The girls nodded in agreement. Meanwhile, in Naruto's royal vehicle, the Rinnegan king told his driver to inform him as soon as they got back home before he lay down on his seat and fell asleep. The Hokage's office. The Hokage Tower. Kanahigaku no Sato. "Sir?" Minato looked up to the door at his assistant, and the woman continued, "There are 2 people here to see you. Tell them to come back in an hour, I'm on my break." He swallowed a spoonful of ramen and took a swig of sake. "Sir, they said it is of great importance." "They all say that, Suki, tell them to come back later." The woman named Suki began fidgeting in place, then she added, "Spring Country was invaded 2 days ago." This seemed to get the Yandame's attention. Suki stepped aside and allowed 2 people to enter. A bald man with bloodshot eyes and blood-stained chakra armor. He had a sharp face and thin lips, which kept looking around the office suspiciously. The woman, or better yet girl, had long silver hair and was in a pink and white dress that went down to her knees as well as black sandals. She too had bloodshot eyes and her chest was heaving like she had been running all the way from spring. The 2 graciously bowed to the Yandame, and he motioned for them to be at ease. "Spring is miles away from Fire Country. How were you able to come so fast if the invasion was 2 days ago?" "We first ran to Waterfall and Lord Shibuki was gracious enough to have a ninja carry me here. He can carry himself." The little girl marched forward and presented the clothed letter her mistress had written in her haste. The words were disjointed and partly illegible with the haste at which Koiki had written it, but the Yandame had years of experience reading through the bad handwriting of some of his ninjas. Even still, the words were all over the place and panicked. "Danger, King of Sukai, invincible, unstoppable army, he can fly, advanced technology, he will come for the other countries. Warn everyone I might be dead, please, save my people again." "King of Sukai? Where have I heard that before?" The blond man wondered under his breath as his eyebrows furrowed in thought. He hummed and looked to the 2 scared people before his desk. "I will send some of my ninjas to investigate, but I need to know before I do, what else can you tell me about this King of Sukai?" The young girl sharply looked to the older man beside her and jerked her head to the Yandame, glaring at the shivering man to speak. Minato kept silent as the bald man tried to gather his wits before he spoke. "Lord Fourth, I was in the army that was to intercept the King of Sukai and his army before they got to the capital." His soldiers, he clenched his hand and bit his bottom lip as images of the blood that had poured that day flashed through his mind. His best friend getting his head ripped off his shoulders by an uppercut, another friend having a barbed spear thrust deep into his stomach, twisted and yanked out, pulling the intestine with it, a comrade being brought to the ground and being punched to death by the soldier hovering over him. His younger brother, fresh into the Spring Country army and a little wet behind the ears but still a very competent ninja, had his spine ripped out and used to cleave off the head of another spring ninja. "They are monsters." He spat with rage and disgust. "They move and fight as a unit. They do not know what pain means." He recollected seeing a comrade breaking his kunai against the tough golden under armor but still using the butt to break the nose of the soldier. This didn't stop the high-rank Sukai soldier from slicing open the ninja from his navel all the way up to his forehead. None of their blades could penetrate the armor, whether it was silver, gold or platinum, but for the copper and bronze. A comrade had driven his fist through the chest of a Sukai soldier, and instead of falling onto his knees, the bronze rank used the position to break the elbow with a knee kick, put the limb, and use it to continuously bash the head of his opponent. And their king, he did not do any of the fighting, he just whooshed off the ground and watched us get crushed. "Whooshed?" Minato asked with an eyebrow raised. "He flew up into the air." He can fly, huh? From the general analysis he had gotten from the shaky, paranoid report of the foreign ninja, he could gather that the Sukai soldiers were as close to unbeatable as unbeatable could ever be. But he was still interested in this king of Sukai, and why that name just sounded so familiar. Describe this king of Sukai. He has the palest skin I have ever seen, red hair that looks like he soaked them in blood, and his eyes, he had to pause to gather himself. He had black eyes with red rings in them. Were they concentric red rings, I mean circles? The yondaime asked slowly. The man looked at him in surprise before he replied with a simple yes. The Namikaze Hokage clasped his fingers together, perched his elbow on his desk, and narrowed his eyes in a faraway look. The description the man had given was similar to the one his former teacher, Jiraiya the Toad Sage, had given of one of his first students, one among a group of 3, that had red hair and the same described eyes, but with the difference that they were purple with black rings, not black with red rings. Whenever he asked Jiraiya to elaborate, he always said that things always came easier for the boy: taijutsu, ninjutsu, and even genjutsu. He was a fast learner, and he associated it with the eyes. The eyes. The third dijutsu. The Rinnegan. That was the name of the dijutsu, but that was close to all he knew, except that Jiraiya suspected the child, he still couldn't remember the boy's name, was either a descendant of the Uzumaki clan or the Senju clan. Could it be that there was a completely different Rinnegan holder with a more sinister pair of eyes than the child Jiraiya trained? The Toad Sage had said that the boy had died. He needed to dig deeper into this, because if indeed it was a different Rinnegan holder, and one that led an army of monsters, then he had a lot of questions. Did the different, more menacing color mean that it was stronger? Was the Rinnegan holder the thought to be dead former student of Jiraiya? This army of monsters, were they indeed unbeatable as the man claimed? And the king of Sukai, the kingdom of Sukai, why was it all so familiar? Suki! He shouted, and his assistant popped in. Find Kakashi and tell him that the dog needs to go for a walk. A code that Kakashi needed to don the dog A&BU mask again. Right away, sir, she said and rushed out. What's that supposed to mean? The little girl asked, a little bit offended that the man wanted to have his dog walked rather than help her country and her daimyo. Minato looked at her briefly before he said, Don't worry about it. I will have my assistant take care of your needs while you are in Konoha, he said, but instead of calling the woman, he scratched his chin in thought. The 2 spring ninjas observed the pensive man as he bit his thumb and smeared it onto his desk. A small plume of smoke later, and a hand-sized toad in a white robe and wooden sandals sat on his desk. Reverse summon Jiraiya. I need to ask him some questions on that red head he taught a long time ago. The toad silently saluted and disappeared, leaving Minato to his thoughts and 2 intrigued spring visitors. Why does that name sound so familiar? He ran his fingers through his hair before it finally came to him, not the complete answer but a memory of 2 red-haired 2-year-olds who were sitting on the swing in the playground, holding hands and looking at the sky as they gently swished back and forth, never letting go of each other's hands. I'm gonna call it the Sukai Kingdom, the boy said, struggling to have the long words come out, but his sister knew what he was talking about. She always knew what he was talking about. The young twin girl smiled widely at her older twin brother. Why? She asked in a high, squeaky voice. 'Cause it's gonna be hid in the sky, he answered as he made a grand gesture to the clouds and the sun, shining down warmly on the children. Can I be the queen? The girl asked timidly and blushed at the larger-than-life smile Naruto gave her. Yes, you can be the queen. Net any junior? A high-pitched voice squeaked, making the boy she was calling wince and wiggle his pinky fingers in his ears. The boy looked at her briefly with his sky-blue eyes before he returned them to the scroll he was reading, an old report his father had allowed him to have on Minato's failed mission to rescue his older siblings from a mysterious kidnapper. Yes? He said as his lips twitched downwards at the amount of detail his father put into the report, from every step to the exact shoe size of the kidnapper. For the little Minato clone it was strange. I was thinking of having a team dinner at my place tomorrow. Mama even said that she won't mind. The girl clasped her hands before her and lilted on her heel nervously, blushing as the stoic boy flicked his eyes down to her from his perch on a tree branch and narrowing them briefly. Kakashi-sensei went on a mission, but you and Sai are still available. So what do you say? Sure. Tell your mother to make a lot of ramen, please. The girl pumped her fist to her side and quickly straightened back up when Junior looked at her, his empty blue eyes analyzing her for something but returning back to the report. Where's Sai? I need to tell him what to say and what not to say when he's with my mama. Junior unrolled the old scroll a little more with his lips pursed. Right behind you. The girl yelped in surprise and leaped away from the widely grinning artist named Sai. Your detection skills need work. The blonde muttered as his eyes scanned the scroll. He had stopped counting how many times he had read and reread the scroll and drilled those that had gone on the mission for information. His father, the Yondaime Hokage of Konoha, Ibiki Marino, Inoichi Yamanaka, and finally Mabuki Haruno, the mother of his pink-haired teammate, who was busy yelling at the smiling black-haired boy. Junior was not able to completely grill the former Jounin shinobi turned civilian councilwoman for information, but this chance of team dinner at Sakura's house was too good an opportunity to pass. I don't know how you couldn't hear me. I've been standing behind you for 10 whole minutes, Sai said in a pleased voice. Sakura brought down her fist on the top of his head and yelled, You almost gave me a heart attack, you idiot! As the two bickered on Minato, Namikaze Jr. knew that his father resented his dead older siblings. That much was very obvious. Naruto and Naruto, that was what he said their names were, had their faces scratched out of every picture, and the birth records were taken out of the hospital and personally kept in the attic of the Hokage's mansion, away from the prying eyes of the general public but not away from the eyes of the only living child of the Yondaime. Junior knew that Naruto and Naruto were the joint holders of the nine-tailed fox, one of the soul and the other for the chakra. He knew that despite his father always ordering him to give up his investigation, the 13-year-old boy found it strange that everyone in Konoha, even those that went on the failed retrieval mission, found the twins to be the nicest, cutest kids you will ever meet, while Minato frequently called them vile beasts that should be slowly eaten away by termites and worms. And this was the man that led the retrieval team. It was, for lack of a better word, strange. Minato skillfully hid the hate from the people, because the people of the village had mourned the twins' death when the news had returned, but Junior was exposed to it every single day since the day he could make coherent thought. It was not something people widely knew, but from Junior's personality and his vast skill set for someone as young as him, the Yondaime had been putting him through the grinder. From sunrise to sunset, Minato Sr. had the boy exercise and practice and practice and exercise, all over again. 10 years of being forced to live up to his father's high expectations not only took its toll on Junior's body but also his mind, specifically his personality. Sakura dusted down her red apron shirt and gave the mess of limbs on the ground a final kick to his torso before she asked her stoic blonde teammate, Hey, shouldn't you ask your dad before you come for the team dinner? He won't mind, the boy answered. Their team was on a break from missions because Junior was still healing from his wounds from fighting Sasuke a few days ago. His ribs were still pretty sore and the fracture on his collarbone had been sealed up. His only problem was the itchiness of his bandages and how much he sweated any time he was wearing a shirt over them. That was why he only had on a white with red flames jacket over his torso and bandages wound up over his trunk. Are you sure? She insisted. Junior jumped over the question and leaned back, flipping off the tree branch and landing on his feet like a cat before he straightened up and zipped up his jacket. Come on, let's go and see Sasuke. Sai got back to his feet and minutely frowned. Why? I want to look through the Uchiha records on something personal. During the course of his investigation, Inoichi, the Yamanaka clan head, had let out that Itachi and Shursui Uchiha were once the twins' caretakers. The Minato clone wanted to know who his siblings were, if there was even a slight possibility that they were still alive, and gain closure for how broken his childhood was. After watching the interactions between Sasuke and Itachi, before the latter defected, Yugao and Ami Yuzuki, and Asuma, Lia and Aizen Sarutobi, and how close these siblings were, he wanted to have that feeling, because no matter how detached Junior's personality was and how ruthless his decisions were, he still wanted to know what being loved felt like. People said that the twins had love in their heart to spare, but these people chose to stay away from them like the plague out of fear for the wrath of their father. He wanted to have some of that love. He needed some of that love, or his career as a Konoha shinobi would be called into personal scrutiny. How are you sure he will let you? For all we know, he's still mad you brought him back. Sai pointed out, and Sakura hesitantly agreed. Junior folded his arms under his chest and his eyebrows lowered. We'll just have to see, don't we? He spun around on his heel and began his trek to the Uchiha compound. His teammates quickly followed after. A few hours later. The kingdom hidden in the sky. Magi Haruai Gamatomo, head of the Fuinjutsu division, rushed down the stairs of her apartment house situated in the soldier accommodations/barracks district of the Sukai Kingdom, wearing a white and black skirt and a bright red and black long-sleeved shirt without her usual backpack. The platinum underarmor symbolizing her rank and her was still present and glinting under the lights, each one dimmed as she passed by mental command. Her mint green hair was tied up into a ponytail, which she kept on adjusting as she ran. She stopped at the bottom stairs. Her eyes quickly looked around and made sure that the furniture in the parlor and living room were in place before she moved out of the house. She pulled up the sleeves of her shirt and clapped her hands. The platinum armor on her body shimmered and disappeared from sight, and even though it was still very much there, she couldn't feel much like if she had it in sight. Her metal boots changed into white sneakers and deep red knee socks. The feeble girl straightened her skirt and closed the door with a click. She took in a deep breath, sparing a smile to the soldiers that rushed past her house, chattering excitedly and dragging each other to other parts of the kingdom to see more of the kingdom-wide festival. She cleared her throat and glanced to her side, on the left side of her apartment's porch, where a woman that looked to be in her late 60s sat in a rocking chair, glassy-eyed and motionless. The green-haired girl walked to the woman and gently kissed the side of her temple. The woman remained unresponsive. I'll be going out for the festival, Granny," she said, and the woman only breathed out. "A friend from the medical division would be coming every once in a while to check on you." She tried not to let her spirits drop when she got no reply. The woman she referred to as Granny was once her cellmate during their days in Sound. She had been tortured into a vegetable state by the sadistic snake summoner. Karen had made it her mission to help fix what Orochimaru had caused, but a cure was slow in arriving because they still couldn't find what was wrong with her. The girl smiled sadly and sharply looked up when she heard her name being called. She beamed at the questionably sane head of the Inventions Division. Nirvana was dressed in bright red khaki pants and a black sleeveless hoodie shirt with her metal boots now in the form of white sneakers, like with Magi. The inventor stood with Nora, head of the Scout and Retrieval Division. This time the woman was in a white mask, wearing a gold and black jumpsuit and red trainers. The masked woman was eagerly jogging on the spot and beckoning the youngest division head to come, barely being held back from hurtling deep into the kingdom to the festival. The Soldier Accommodations Division was a wide district that stretched around the kingdom, leaving more than enough space for nature and fields to flourish, making it that the division took up 40% of the outer side of the kingdom. This was so that when it was time to defend the kingdom from internal and external aggression, they would be able to do so as quickly as possible. "Hurry up, Shorty!" Nirvana yelled to the girl and did a double take when she noticed Magi's Granny sitting there. "Oh, and good morning, Granny!" The woman didn't reply, but the inventor knew why and chose not to take offense. The green-haired girl ran over and the three females ran out of the district together. As they got closer, they had to wade through the gaggle of Hyper-Sukai citizens that were moving from tent to tent, playing the games and winning prizes. They looked around with wide eyes at all they were going to be doing for the next 7 days. Magi hopped in place before she grabbed hold of the two older girls' forearms and pulled them towards a stand where various large stuffed animals. As she got there, another person dragging the arm of an amused woman with him there. It was a purple-haired, black-eyed boy that looked to be in his early teens in a pair of black trousers and a black shirt. The woman had black hair and was in a casual green dress. The boy had a small smile on his face as he looked at the stand, where a widely grinning, pot-bellied man stood with his arms akimbo behind the counter. The game was fairly simple. Use a purple rubber ball to hit down a tower of 11 bottles. The females looked at the boy as he bowed to them. "Hello?" Nora waved slightly. "Hey. I see you like stuffed animals." "Not really, I just want to try all the games before the festival is up," was the reply from the boy as his guardian paid for 3 balls. He graciously took the balls and stuck out his tongue from the side of his mouth and wound his right arm back. He lifted his left knee as he dragged his arm back. The ninjas nodded at his form and let his arm fly forward, releasing the ball as he did so. The ball clipped off the first 3 bottles at the top, and the child bit his bottom lip in barely surprised excitement. Then he looked at the other teen with mild shock. "I'm sorry, did you want to have a go?" "My name is Magi," she said in a shy smile to the almost expressionless boy. "Call me Jinji," he said and pointed his thumb to his chest, before pointing to the woman over his shoulder. "And this is my friend Gammy." The woman nodded to them. "So? Do you want to try?" He tossed the ball to her, and she deftly caught it. "Don't worry about paying, Gammy here works in the palace and I just got into the academy." He said it proudly as he puffed out his chest. The women looked at him, tickled by his attitude. They didn't have enough in them to reveal that all 3 of them were platinum-rank division heads. "That's nice," Magi said with a slight bow, hiding her nervous smile. She was above rank to this boy. It wouldn't be nice if she brought his spirits down. She idly tossed the ball between her hands as she walked closer to the counter. "How old are you, Jinji?" 16. "How about you?" Magi rolled the ball in her palms before she drew her right hand back and thrust it forward, like she was palm striking the air, but instead a ball was released. The purple ball tore forward and crashed against the bottles, toppling it all down. "I'm 15. She pointed a massive purple salamander, and thanked the man as she took it, hugging it close to her body. Jinji took the last ball and threw it again, this time tumbling the pyramid of bottles. He hummed and drummed his fingers on the wooden counter, as he carefully looked at each stuffed animal, before he picked out a cartoonish-looking scorpion. The purple-haired boy took the toy and held it under his arm. Why a scorpion? I have an uncle in the army that likes scorpions. He really likes scorpions. He added the last part with a mild shiver. Oh. The 15-year-old girl scuffed her foot on the ground. The other platinum ranks behind them looked at each other, then to the boy's caretaker. Well, see you later, Magi, Jinji said as he turned around, about to run to the next game stand where people were surrounding. Would you mind if we tagged along? Nirvana said with her eyes squinting at the boy's back, ignoring the elbow jab from Nora and the wide-eyed look Magi was sending her. How about we test our strengths over there? She motioned to a sparsely populated test of strength stand, where a short, grizzled-looking man stood with his arms crossed, observing the others that were trying to heft up the mallet and bring it down. I don't think I'm strong enough to carry that thing, Jinji said and began walking away. Gamma shrugged and followed him. Wait. I am if you win then I'll be your slave for a week, she shouted and the boy stopped abruptly. You heard me. Why do you want me to test my strength so much? Don't listen to her, she gets impulsive when she's hungry. Magi interrupted and began pushing away the inventor. No, I know that look, Jinji said as he looked over his shoulder, still gripping his stuffed scorpion under his left arm. She thinks I'm an imposter. I didn't say that, Nirvana tried to say with her hands waving for the boy to calm down, her eyes large like dinner plates that he had caught on so quickly. You don't need to say it, he said before she could finish. Look, you look like someone I know. That's all. She trailed off as Jinji fully turned around, flashing a quick knowing smirk to her. My lord? The purple-haired boy shook his head with a wink. No, my name is Jinji. You must be confusing me with someone else. Those that walked around them unashamedly eavesdropped on their conversation, though they were not able to grab the main points with the small hint the king of Sukai had dropped. You didn't know? Nora fiercely whispered into the multicolored girl's ear. I did. I just wanted to confirm, she muttered back, not so quietly. Magi though tried not to look like she was about to faint. Do you want to tag along with us? Gammy always wants me to be around friends. He handed the stuffed toy to his disguised maid. All the king's royal guards were on the break Naruto had ordered them to go on, to celebrate in the festival, so the king did not have any gold-rank soldiers following his every move in hidden positions, just his reliable combat maid, Shinikora, who was wearing a black wig and chose to don something more casual so as not to draw attention, while Naruto had on a purple wig and black contact lenses to hide his godly Rinnegan. He drew the line on applying makeup. Hiding in a genjutsu might draw the attention of a few people, especially the soldiers that had spent the majority of their lives studying illusions in the academy. The females fought the urge not to bow to their master, who was obviously in disguise so as to hide his rank. Yes, my sir King Ahem Jinji, Magi replied on behalf of the others. The majority of the festival took place around the royal palace of the king, which was placed on a highly raised platform at the very center of the kingdom, giving the king a good view of his whole kingdom. This didn't mean that places at the edge of the kingdom were left out of the festivities. In the soldier accommodations district the bars there open and all the drinks were free, as by the king's order. Naruto would pay for the drinks from his treasury. The king looked around with his mighty but hidden Rinnegan eyes and ducked into a dark alley. His subordinates followed after him, not drawing too many eyes besides the undercover police officers, who recognized the 3 division heads and left it be, though they kept a vigilant ear out if they needed help. A police officer never truly went on a break, even if Naruto had ordered for their vigilance to cool down a bit. Shinikoro Origami stayed at the mouth of the alley, just shaded by the darkness, and allowed the other 3 females to pass by. The king hopped onto a dumpster and sat down. He leaned back and looked up to the sky. It was about 5 in the afternoon, and the weather was very pleasant, caressing his skin with warm breeze and making the Rinnegan king's sign in comfort. He closed his eyes and placed his hands behind his head. You have questions, he assumed, and the females standing before him, their king sitting on a fairly clean dumpster. You're free to ask. They couldn't hold back the impulse to place their hands over their hearts and tilt their heads down to the ground, and despite having his eyes closed and supposedly unaware of their movement, the king still puffed out an air of frustration. Why are you in disguise, my lord? Nora asked first. Is your life in danger? Jinji, Naruto corrected for the second time and answered. And no, I want to truly enjoy this festival without worrying about being bowed to left and right. I will be fairly busy during the course of this festival, and the first day might be the only time I have to really relax. Why not pose as a higher-ranked official than a new academy student? Nirvana queried. Naruto shrugged. I just felt like it. Sir Jinji, if I may, I do not think it is proper for one such as you to walk around without proper protection. Nora said, putting her foot down with a mildly trembling voice. Naruto's lips twitched down, but he kept his eyes closed. Are you assuming that we have an assassin after my head in my own home? Among my own people? The masked woman sputtered. No. I did not mean to assume. Are you saying that if anything remotely bad happened, and that is a big if, then my police officers are not more than enough to contain it? SSSS, sir. Are you saying that I do not have the ability to protect myself? He sat up abruptly, and the shaking woman fell onto her knees immediately, making sure her hand was still over her heart, and her eyes were on the ground in subservience. That after everything you have seen me do without lifting my hands I still need constant security? The fact that he spoke in a calm, low voice was what sent chills down the spines of the division heads. There was no oppressive force on their shoulders, there was no bloodlust in his voice, he did not even glare at them. He sat forward, propping his hands on the wide metal lid of dumpster at his side. That my servant, Shinikora, is not fully capable of defending me if I ask her to? I apologize, my lord Naruto. IST stepped out of L9. It will not happen again. Naruto stared her stoically for a few seconds before he leaned back again and looked at the clear sky. No, it's fine. You are just looking out for my safety, but I would prefer it if you did not think of me like some sort of regular grounder daimyo that is heavily dependent on others to defend him. He said, speaking of how the daimyos and leaders on the ground mostly had no prior knowledge of combat and hid behind their soldiers. You are not a grounder, sir, you are the great king of the Tsukai kingdom. The greatest and mightiest leader the world has ever seen and will ever see. Nirvana piped up, trying to quell whatever anger was in her leader that he did not make them see. Magi bobbed her head in agreement. You do not need protection, my king, we your people need your protection. They were trying to stoke his ego so he didn't crush the head of Scout and Retrieval, Nora, into a bloody paste. It wasn't working because the king was not angry in the first place. It's fine, Naruto said as he waved for them to calm down. But when I am in this disguise I am Jinji the Academy student, understood? Yes, Jinji. Good. Now, I trust in the abilities in the Inventions Division and Fuinjutsu Division to have the perfect device to protect our home from external aggression of any kind, whether it be jutsu, bombs, or physical attacks. The floating island kingdom was being kept in the air by strong solar-powered engines that powered massive, heavily muffled fans that constantly spun so that the kingdom was able to stay in one place at a time unless those that worked in the controls were ordered to move the kingdom. These engines were hidden behind Fuinjutsu that summoned clouds to hide them and cover the sound from the notice of the grounders, also swaddling the kingdom in clouds and sunlight to hide its presence. If by chance they were found, then there was a translucent bubble of chakra that covered the island kingdom, able to take even the strongest lightning attack constantly until soldiers arrived to repel them. I have looked at each security measure myself and I have personally approved them, or have I not? You have, Jinji, Magi replied. Remember this, I was the one that assembled people to fight for my cause, but that is not all. I am obligated to protect them, not because it is my duty as a king but also because I want to protect them. I would use my last breath to ensure all of your safety, despite how selfish my ambitions are. Your ambitions are our ambitions, Nora said. And we are forever honored you regard your people to such extents, Nirvana added. The Rinnegan King opened his eyes, showing the black contact lenses there, and sat up. Well, I think this is more than enough of this talk. Go and enjoy the festival. Do you mind if we accompany you? Magi asked, watching as their king deftly hopped off the dustbin and dusted down the back of his black pants. When he looked at her with slightly narrowed eyes, she hastily said, so that we can enjoy the festival with you, my king, I mean Jinji. Fine, try and keep up, he said, in a tiny, excited smile spread on his face, and he raced out of the alley with Gammy, still holding the stuffed scorpion the king had won. The three platinum ranks had to push their way through the crowd of people as they too ran about, playing and eating all the festival offered, most of which would be paid by the king through the civilian division, while the others, like the throwing games, were paid by those that participated. It was all a blur of color and laughter as they chased their king as he rushed from game to game, food court to food court, actually letting himself go as much as his upbringing allowed and sparing a small smile on his face and a thrilled glow in his cold black eyes. At one moment they were all trying a dart game and another Nirvana was in a dance competition against a dark-skinned man with 4 arms, then it all slurred together, and Gammy tried her hand eating a spicy pepper, making the gloating chef gape in horror when the disguised soul of the Nine Tails swallowed 10 flaming hot peppers with a large, toothy grin on her face. The group laughed uproariously when the man grew red in the face after taking a single bite, thinking his peppers were defective, before they all ran away as he yelled profanities at them. Jinji almost got into a fist fight with a well-built man after said man brazenly groped Gammy, if not for the timely intervention of Magi and Nora, who swept in and knocked sense into the man before Naruto could lose his cool and suck out his soul. The mood took a slight dip after that until they ran into Satoshi, the head of rescue and support, and Mora, head hunter ninja for the kingdom. Both were wearing casual sleeveless shirts and black pants, though instead of sneakers or trainers they wore black boots. They waved over the group and did a double take when they saw Naruto in his Jinji disguise, though they silently, mutually, agreed to go along with it, even if they decided to still give him the respect of a king. Mora and Nora immediately threw their arms over each other's shoulders, and the ever-so-happy Satoshi and Nirvana began chattering amongst themselves. Jinji walked in the middle, but even still he dictated where to go by subtle bodily cues. "Hey, Jinji," Satoshi said as he turned back to the disguised king. "Would it be okay if I left to go and see Hamato at the Grey Tusk Bar back in the SA, Soldier Accommodations, Division? We have some important things to talk about." "Is it something I should be made aware of?" Naruto prodded, idly realizing that it was 9 at night and the street lights were on, illuminating the still busy streets. He noticed a few soldiers running on the roofs and stationing themselves to watch over them. His eyes twinkled at their intuition. The smile on the man's face never wavered. "Yes. Tomorrow." Naruto nodded and motioned for the man to come closer, whispering in his ear. "Please do so. I'd like it if you and Hamato reported to my office with Indra. I have a request to ask him." "Yes, Sir Jinji," the man said with a subtle nod of his head. He soon melted into the background and vanished in the crowd of people. The king saw some of the police patrol back and forth in the crowd, some dragging with them handcuffed people that had been causing trouble. As the night went on, the throng of people thinned and the patrol increased, until Naruto became tired and decided to return back to his palace. Naruto's eyes burst open and he quietly groaned as the sleep gently left him. He tried to sit up, but a weight on his chest kept him in place. He looked down and blinked twice when he saw a white head snuggling close to his chest. His eyes ventured to his right, and there was a mop of rainbow-colored hair hugging his arm, and then to his right there was mint-green hair. All three females moaned tiredly when he shifted his arms, making him realize that he had them wrapped around their shoulders, pulling them close to him under the thick blanket. The king breathed gently and his fingers twitched. The girls were lifted off his body and he levitated upwards a little. His control over gravity pulled him out, and he allowed them to drop gently onto the bed. The Rinnegan holder landed on his feet silently, sparing a quick look to the girls before he proceeded to his bathroom. He passed by the mirror and stopped when he got a glimpse at himself. His red hair was frizzy and all over the place. There was a cow lick on his forehead from Kami knows what. He had many red kisses on his chest and mid-abdomen, and his black pants were frayed at the feet. The teen rubbed out the last vestiges of sleep from his eyes and walked into his bathroom. He had a crazy, partly memorable night. Like with a few other nights he had with some of the women he trusted, this trust was for them to keep their bedroom relations a secret. It wasn't the first time he had invited more than one female into his room, and with his almost insatiable Uzumaki libido it would most definitely not be the last. It was good that he didn't just ask any random woman, but rather people that had sworn an oath of secrecy, mainly due to how close they worked to his office. Shinekora was usually the one that participated in the nightly, and sometimes daily, romps in the bedroom, but he had sent her out on an errand in the kingdom as they reached the palace. The king stepped out of the bathroom, steam billowing in his wake as he rubbed his hair with a towel. He passed the bed where the girls lay on, Nirvana, Nora and Magi, and entered his wardrobe. He emerged in a short-sleeved red shirt and pants, his obsidian underarmor now in plain view. He opened the door and passed by his maid as he walked out. The woman followed behind him, making sure to close the door to hide the decency of the exhausted females sleeping in the king's bed. "Indra and the others are waiting for you in your office," the fox said to her king. Naruto nodded and proceeded up the stairs, replying to the greeting of the palace workers that went around throwing curtains open and dusting down his furniture. Outside the palace the kingdom was already awake and ready for another day of festivities. 2 silver ranks snapped into attention at his arrival and opened the door for him. Naruto entered and they closed the door behind him, though allowing Shinekora to enter as well. The office of the king of the Tsukai kingdom had 4 sides and a solid mahogany desk. The carpet was deep red and the paint on the wall was white with gold lines on the corners and the entire ceiling. The whole of the wall to the right of the desk was a large window, showing the kingdom. It was an unassuming office by Naruto's request, but only until he decided what to fill it with. Indra, head of frontline soldiers, Hamato, head of intelligence and interrogation, and Satoshi, head of rescue and support, stood at attention before his desk in their combat uniform. Indra had the kubikiri sheath on his back. Naruto smoothly sat down and relaxed in his chair. "Before we begin, Satoshi and Hamato." He motioned for them to speak. Hamato was the one to speak up. "We were discussing on what you wanted us to do during our last division head meeting here in your office." Naruto, out in understanding, recalling that he had tasked the division heads to prepare for what would happen after the festival. He also assigned specific functions to specific members. To the two heads, he gave them the task of keeping watch of the countries he had already conquered. He told them to go on. Our tracking chip tells us that Madame Koike is currently meeting Hatake Kakashi. He unsealed a scroll from his palm. This is what they discussed so far. Do you want us to have Kakashi and his team taken care of? He gave the conversation manuscript to Naruto, and he opened it. His smile increased fractionally, and he handed it back to Hamato, his fully exposed Rinnegan glowing with joy. Perfect. That is exactly the message I want Konoha to get. Speaking of messages, he pulled out a drawer from his desk and riffled through the neatly filed papers there before pulling out a single sheet. He gave it to Hamato. Have that sent to all the leaders of the countries and hidden villages we haven't yet conquered, including Konoha and Fire Country. Make sure you assign them to their respective leaders, not just generally assigning them. I want them to feel like I'm speaking to them personally. If I may, my lord. Indra piped up. Yes? Do you want them to wait for a reply? Naruto hummed before he shook his head. No. I made sure to have every possible outcome of them reading the letter accounted for. If they choose right or wrong is up to them. He perched his elbows on his desk and his head on his thumbs. I want at least